As soon as the little light turns on. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies. I usually do a whole longer intro, but I'm not feeling it tonight. I'm not. I'm
because we're
just not.
talking draft.
It is because we're talking draft, and there's still so much to digest. Where literally a week past the draft, we were here live at this time last week, Thursday. You were on Disguised Coverage with myself and Anthony Romeo, and we were watching this entire thing, this entire first round. And then on Friday, all of round 2 and 3 live, pick by pick analysis. Your Lions did fantastic. We were praising everything that they did. You were a very happy camper. And then, what's nice and what I appreciate about you, other than obviously like your tremendous football knowledge and everything that you do, you're not a Bills fan. So I view myself as a very objective person. I'm very analytical, very logical. But I think in people's minds, there's always some kind of like doubt. They're like, well, at the end of the day, like he does like the Bills. So whether I say things one way or the other, it's like he's too close or he's too attached or he's too emotional. I completely disagree with that. But with you, you're a super knowledgeable guy, but you're also detached completely because you're not a Bills fan. So to have you there live and to have you now on this follow-up episode of Disguised Coverage going over the Bills 2021 draft picks and reviewing that's really why I wanted to bring you aboard, because you're great, you know a ton, and there's no emotional attachment. It's just pure, here's what it is from a prospect breakdown perspective, a fit perspective. You're like the perfect guy to have.
Well, I appreciate that. You're way too kind. I'm just a dude talking ball, man. And this is an outlet for me to get all the crazy thoughts in my head. I'm sorry, I'm reading the comments.
And Taylor, so some of them are just like good stuff, like of, talking about how great the episode was and there's plenty of room on the wagon. Jump on this comment. If you're wondering, there was a comment made earlier today. I tweeted a bunch of things to the person. There was a person on Twitter who was talking about how the Browns are way better than the Bills and how Baker Mayfield is better than Josh Allen. And his exact comment was like, we have a better wide receiver core, better defense, better O-line, better D-line, and Baker has already bested Josh Allen, and it kind of like blew up a little bit. So Taylor is referencing that there. I appreciate you, Taylor. Yeah, kind of devolved a little bit.
Gotcha. Well, I can easily go over to the stand over there. I got a Bills hat sitting over there somewhere.
So there's some Bills fandom love there for you.
No, so let me get into that a little bit. I kind of got a sweet spot for the Bills, and my aunt lived in Buffalo, or like outside of Buffalo, when I was a kid for a few years. And when I was a kid, I would get like this random Bills stuff all the time. And I was like, I don't know who this team is. Like, there was no DirecTV then. And
why are you giving me this?
Yeah, I was listening to blacked out Lions games on the radio because they couldn't sell out the Pontiac Silverdome. But
those were the days.
Yeah. So, no, I mean, long story short, just my dad always talked about Jim Kelly when I was a kid, and because our quarterback growing up was Scott Mitchell, then we jumped into Charlie Batch, and it was really bad as a Lions fan. So, needless to say, I've always kind of had a sweet spot for the Bills. And when I was playing Madden as a kid, like that was always the team I picked, like in franchise mode. Cause I'm not just like, let me play a franchise mode and forget about it. Like I go deep 17, 24 years, 25 years into franchise mode. And, I remember playing Madden with like Trent Edwards and JP Lossman. And I'm like, dude, these guys are bums. But
it was so bad.
Yeah, no. So I've always got a sweet spot for the Bills, but no, I'm happy to be back on. I'm happy to be talking Bills and draft. Obviously, we're going to get into a lot of good stuff, and I'm super pumped. And to just go off what you said earlier, Browns, Bills, I'm just going to say this for Browns fans. Look, I'm going to root for both teams because I'm like a Lions fan. Obviously, I'm at the bottom of the barrel. I get the pain, but at the same time, if we go back to the AFC Championship game, I didn't see the Cleveland Browns in that game. I'm just saying. So
shots fired. I like that. I like it. And I think the Browns are a good team. I like what they did this offseason. I also hate what they did because they took Newsome and Owusu-Koramoah, which made me very upset. But I get the fandom for people when people get excited, but it's just wild to see some of the takes from people. I mean, Twitter isn't, the most rational, great place to have. This is Hilarious. Thank you, Greg. This is too much handsome for one live stream. I'm pretty sure it violates the Geneva Conventions. That's both conventions from Geneva, 1 and 2, and maybe the 6th one as well. I appreciate you, Greg. Greg usually takes up all the handsome on the screen when he's on the screen.
Sure does. He sure does.
But yeah, you get those reactionary fans, and you have one good year, and it's like, we're going to the ship, and we're better than this, and this. And then if you have a good free agency class and you have a good draft, it just furthers that notion. And yeah, so you get some wild takes. And I appreciate your Bills fandom. I always have a soft spot for the Lions. It's ironic. My favorite player growing up was Barry Sanders and Jerry Rice. Mm-hmm. So I love Barry Sanders. But I was always very good at Madden. I started playing Madden 93 when I was little, and I would go hard in Madden. And all throughout like 90s Maddens, I would pick the Lions because they always weren't good. And I would house people because all I would do is Barry Sanders and Herman Moore. Those were the only two things I would do, and that was it. And I remember back when the names weren't displayed and like being little, and people would be like, "Who's 84? Like, why is he so good?" I was like, "That's Herman Moore." I was like, "He's fantastic." Like, they were a fun team to be. Oh, Scott Mitchell, Charlie Batch. All the failed.
Bad. Mike McMahon, Joey Harrington, Charles Rogers, Mike Williams, Roy Williams. The list goes on.
Dan Orlovsky running out of bounds in the end zone for the safety.
Yeah, dude. We had Jeff Garcia for a minute. We had John Kitna getting flipped upside down. It's been a mess for much of my life. Really, this last year has been solid, and I would agree. Yes, Herman Moore was a stud. Jermaine Crowell back in the day with him. Ooh. Look. We can turn this into a Lions podcast. We turn this into a Bills podcast. We're at whatever direction you guys want to go. I don't care. But it sucks being a Lions fan, but it's also awesome at the same time. So
it is awesome at the same time, especially now. You guys, I alluded to it before. The Lions had a fantastic draft, and then the Frank Ragnow extension came through. I believe as well. So all of a sudden they got this sweet line with Decker and Sewell and Ragnow. And I really, really genuinely liked what the Lions did in this draft from top to bottom. Every time, the Lions would do something good in the draft, and I was just like, oh man, Russell's got to be loving that. And then the Bills would do something, and I would just be like,
But see, I feel that. I feel that as a fan, for the last 5-6 years with Bob Quinn here, like if we'd get to the second round and I'm like, dude, I want this corner, I want this linebacker, and we're taking, no offense to him, he just got waived today, but Kerryon Johnson, who I didn't want, and we take, another running back, and then we're just doing all these asinine things. Jelani Tavai, who wouldn't be on any starting rotation.
And it even goes back further of all the times. I remember when you guys took Roy Williams, or I don't remember the order, but then like right after, like a couple years, the year after, it was like Charles Rogers as well. And I was like, why are you guys going, what? I was like, there's so many other things. And I was like, well, I guess they're going to ball out on offense. And then Roy Williams was gone. Charles Rogers got injuries and was never amounted to anything. And it's just like always been that thing. And it's, as a Lions fan, you've been in the same position that a Bills fan has been in for so many years, when the Bills would make a pick and it was just like, oh, like laugh out loud Bills, ha, ha, ha. Yeah. Same thing with the Lions, like Lions going to Lions, typical, blah, blah, blah. You get a new coach in Dan Campbell, and everybody's making fun of his like presser and talking about the bite kneecaps thing. And then it's another like, dude, here we go again. What are we going to get? But then you crush the draft, have a phenomenal draft. The upside is there so much for you guys. And I know, again, Bills podcast, but we also talk football here in general. You got a question, and Russ, I want you to field it. So Fernando from Cover One, he wants to know what your opinion is about the Josh Allen, Matthew Stafford comparisons, playing style, and arm talent.
Well, I think their play styles are similar to a sense as far as how well they throw a deep ball, and that kind of alludes to their overall arm talent. And I think when you just look at how they kind of stand up in the pocket and they kind of operate within the structure of the offense, I think you get a lot of similarities there. And I think Josh Allen is obviously a touch more athletic than Matthew Stafford is. Matthew Stafford was not always this athletic. The way that he's becoming down the later parts of his career, he's gotten into much better shape. But there's definitely a lot of comparables as far as, how far they throw the football and really just the overall arm skill and the overall arm talent that is there. I think there's a lot of similarities, but I'm not going to sit here and say I would take Josh Allen over Matthew Stafford, but that's because I've had I've seen Matthew Stafford play for the last 10 plus years, and I will take that. But again, I Josh Allen has proved me wrong so much that it's been phenomenal, and I've enjoyed watching him, and I think we're all very lucky. You guys, his fan base, are lucky to watch him every game. I've been lucky on the outside looking at every game, and it's like, man, this guy is so talented. And honestly, I saw the odds at him at like MVP for plus 1,300 today, and I was like, dude,
wild.
I might put like $20 on that just because I think there's a shot that he really hits MVP.
Sure. There's 1,000% a shot for him to hit that. I've always thought that, and I always thought the comparison between Stafford. It's funny, again, you being a Lions guy. After year 2, my hope for Allen, I was like, just give me a more mobile Matt Stafford. I will take that 1,000% of the time. And then he had a year 3 that was immaculate. We'll see if he can continue on that course. And also, just for everyone, I'm assuming a lot of people know of it, but just in case you don't, look up on YouTube the time when Matthew Stafford basically like broke his entire left shoulder, and despite that, stayed in the game and won the game for the Lions. That was like you hit everything from the technical standpoint, the arm talent. My thought was just from like a dog mentality of like, Allen will gut anything out. And that Matt Stafford thing, I got goosebumps thinking about it. I wish it came in like a playoff game or in a season where the Lions won a title, because it would be played up so like if that season ended in big success for the Lions, that moment, I'm a Red Sox fan. The Curt Schilling bloody sock is one of the coolest things ever. I wish that Matt Stafford drive was known more in the sports pantheon of greatest moments. Dude literally wrecks his whole left shoulder and like plays slumped, guns it, wins the game. Everybody's going to be like, yeah. And he's like, I'm in too much pain. I can't move. Like, don't touch me. Don't go near me. And just what a gamer.
That's how he's always been.
So much. And that's how beautiful. He's always been.
But I will say this now in regards to Josh Allen, like we're getting to the point now of his career where we're looking at quarterbacks and we're saying, hey, that guy kind of reminds me of Josh Allen. So that's a good thing. And I'll say it because I said that about Trey Lance. I look at him and I go, man, this guy kind of reminds me of Josh Allen. And I think in a year or two, when he's in San Francisco and he's balling out, I'm like, man, this guy might be Josh Allen 2.0. So we'll see what happens. And like to the comments, is Goff better than Stafford? Absolutely not. I'm sorry. No way.
I'm taking Stafford.
No way. I'm happy we were able to make the deal happen because I knew Stafford didn't want to be here, and we got 2 first-round picks out of it. But Jared Goff is not better than Matt Stafford. No, let's jump into what we got going here. We're like 11 minutes into Lions.
We are. It's easy to get off track when you're just excited about football. You're excited about the draft. I saw you put out some tweets earlier today about like getting ready for the 2022 draft already and getting excited for it a little bit. I'm still riding that post-draft high, the post-draft buzz. I love it. But also this draft had some questionable things. If you watched the live stream last week, as I know a lot of you guys did, you guys were already mentioning in the comments, we were here live on night 1 and night 2. So you saw our live reactions, our thoughts, our analysis of every single pick, including the Bills picks. And we're going to start with the Bills' first-round pick, number 30, Gregory Rousseau, edge out of the University of Miami, a Hurricane. A move that I'm going to let you start, Russ, because you are the more detached of the two. But it was definitely a move that the understanding is there, the need is there, and what he potentially could be is there. But when we were there on the live stream, the move was definitely a little bit like instead of a bang, got it, makes sense. And we had some questions around it. I know he was, I didn't even mention this in the lead-in, but I know he was, I think he's roughly like 58th on your big board, which was fantastic. I mentioned it last week on the live stream. Russ did his top, 125?
Yep.
Right. Prospects on cover1.net, full write-ups and breakdowns for every single person, where they rank at their position, where they rank overall, pros, cons, summaries, all those things. Russ, what was your thought? Gregory Rousseau, first round, pick number 30 for the Buffalo Bills, checks the need of edge, but what are your thoughts on the player?
Well, look, I like the player quite a bit. I'll be honest. Like I think there's a lot to work with him, and I think he's somebody that when you look at 6'6", 6'7", 260, 270 in that range, I mean he's gonna vary between that size throughout much of his career. And I think like maybe right now you're getting I don't want to say AJ Epinesa 2.0, but maybe similar in a sense because he's raw in regards to just his overall pass rush plan. A lot of his, stuff as far as getting sacks were more so the pocket breaking down and good coverage and things like that. But like you can't teach that kind of raw talent because there's just a raw talent there. And when you have that amount of length, and that versatility, that was the first thing that stood out. And I love versatility. It's like my top thing when I look at when I'm coaching players, when I'm, I coach my kids team and I coach at the high school level. So when I get down there and I'm looking, I'm like, okay, this kid can move around in different spots. That's great for our defense. I can move this kid around. When I look at Greg Rousseau, I'm like, this dude's playing as a 0 shade, one snap, and then he bumps out to a 5-tech. He's tilted as a 7. He's playing a 2-eye. You're seeing all these different things. And I'm like, okay, that's huge. And to learn that is big because there's different responsibilities that go with that. If you're playing down low and you're playing it as a 0 shade or playing as a nose, you might have to 2-gap down there. If you're playing as a 5-tech, you might get to just pin your ears back and rush the passer. It really depends on what you have going on. So I think once he gets established into the NFL, and he will with Buffalo, you give him more of like that defined role, and I think he can flourish with that. And I think you saw it. I mean, 15.5 sacks is no fluke. I don't care who you are, especially when you're just learning the position, because he was a receiver coming out. So I think, yes, it's crazy, right?
Wild.
That guy it's a receiver. But I think when you look at it, like this guy can come in, he can play it. I don't want to say sporadically, but he can certainly come in and probably play for you right away if you needed to. Mm-hmm. You look at just the overall future of the position. We mentioned AJ Epinesa. We don't know exactly what he's going to be yet, but you look at Jerry Hughes. I've said this before. His contract's up at the end of the year. He's going to be 34 in August. Like, he's not getting any younger. And let's be honest, it's time to move forward. And this is a way to move forward because I think at worst, like I said, maybe AJ Epinesa 2.0. At best, maybe he becomes DeForest Buckner or Eric Armstead, one of those longer edge rushers, or maybe even a Calais Campbell, for instance. I mean, if he comes in and gets that type of success, I think Campbell has 92 sacks in the course of his career. So if you get that type of production, I mean, that's huge. So while it's a little rich off my board, I think you realize 58, you're picking again at 62. He's probably not going to be there again. So let me just take him now. And maybe they swing and miss here simply because of Jason Owe going to pick next, and then Joe Cheyenne after that. So it's hard to justify, right? But if this is your guy, you got to take your guy, and I can't fault them for that. So and that's how I view it, as viewing it from the Bills' perspective, and obviously throwing in kind of my spice as well. So that's where I'm at.
Fair enough. You hit several points. Oh man, you hit several points that I liked. I think one, actually, and before we get to where I'm at, I wanted a follow-up question real quick to something you said. So you mentioned as you get him more into a defined role. So with him being 6'6", basically almost 6'7", 266 pounds. He's got that length. He's got that frame and that versatility across the line, like you mentioned. Do you see him potentially putting on more weight and functioning more towards the interior of the line, or do you see him staying leaner and being more of a functional piece off the edge? I know Brandon Beane mentioned that he would start out on the edge, but with that frame, you could make the case that he puts on more weight, maybe kicks inside a little more, or do you see him more staying on the outside?
I think it's going to vary off of, honestly, what McDermott wants to do with the defense in the future, right? Like, you might have a 4-3 defense today. You might have a 4-2 defense next week, but next year you might move to a 3-4 because of just where your roster is at. So good coaches adjust. They don't stay things set in stone. And I think McDermott, when you watch that team, they do a lot of adjusting. But what I got to thinking, and I thought about the podcast today, and I thought about, bringing up some things, and I thought about just the Bills and Greg Rousseau in general. And when I think about this, I think, one package that always stands out to me is when the Bills sugar the A gap, right? And I think about this. You've got Tremaine Edmonds, who's just massive for a linebacker. And what if you bring in a player like Greg Rousseau and AJ Epinesa and you clog those gaps and you have Edmonds and you're just keeping interior offensive linemen who, traditionally speaking, are 6'2.5", 6'3", a little bit more stout, don't have as much length. And they've got these two massive edge rushers standing in front of them. And you're able to sugar the A gap using those types of blitzes and just all these different variances that you can bring. So to really answer the question, yeah, I think he's probably going to stay on the outside. But again, it just really depends on where the roster goes from here. And it depends on what the future looks like. So could he bulk up a little bit? Sure. Not in a bad way, not like heavy. I think just more muscle than anything else. But I mean, the kid's a redshirt freshman. We see it all the time with basketball players, right? They get to the NBA, they get drafted as 6'5", small forwards, and they end up being 6'10" power forwards. So, I mean, there's a chance this guy could put on another inch or two. I don't know. He's listed as a redshirt freshman, so we'll see what happens. But I mean, I'm pumped for him. If there was any spot for him to land, this was the spot. This is the place that he can become the most successful, I think.
Oh, that's a very good point. It's a very good key. I'm very interested to see. I like the NBA comparison. I want to see, I love looking at dudes like, even though I don't like LeBron, but looking at LeBron when he came in the league, or like Giannis up in Milwaukee, and they were like lankier, kind of skinnier guys. And then like 3-4 years later, they're just these mountain of men that are just cut and have mass. And Russo's frame can support that. I think for me, I love the breakdown you gave. I'm very similar in that regard. You can't project anything hands down when it comes to Greg Rousseau right now, just because of all the variables that you have. He's so young in age, just where he is. He's also young in terms of playing the position and snaps and where he is in his career. You mentioned it coming out of high school. He was a wide receiver and a safety. He plays edge at Miami. He's redshirted in 2017. He fractures his ankle in 2018 and only plays in 2 games. Then 2019, he plays in 13 games, 7 starts, has the 15.5 sacks, like 19.5 tackles for loss, is just a monster. Has arguably like the best year at edge behind Chase Young at Ohio State. Just crushes it. And from a measurables perspective, you're looking at him. The length is super intriguing. The size, the frame. I love the idea of like sugaring the A gap with him. And even if he doesn't do anything, they could snap the ball and he could just stand straight up and do this. And I'd be happy with it, because his wingspan is going to cause problems like in the middle of the field. Yep. I like the way he uses his length. My question with all of it, I am very traits over production. I tweeted a video of Mina Kimes from ESPN saying it on the day of the draft. I think that's the most important thing. I'm a traitsy person. I think a lot of us are, especially as you start to get into like the nitty gritty of the draft and going through prospects. I just wonder what his trajectory looks like, what the timeline looks like, and how much technique and cleanup they're able to do with his game. That someone I think made the comment during the draft last week, and I thought it was really spot on. He's almost like the Josh Allen of edges, because he has this super high ceiling, but he also has this low floor, because he really only had 1 year in college. And that 1 year he was still adjusting to a new position. And then when you watch the tape, he's winning with that length and that size, but he doesn't have the technique yet. He's not really using that hand power. His placement isn't always great. He doesn't have great, first step explosion or quickness, but then he has the stride that can make up for things. He is that compression style rusher that so many people in the NFL like today. I remember Daniel Jeremiah mentioned it in like February or March, he was talking about it in reference to Joe Tryon, but this new brand or breed of edge rusher where quarterbacks get the ball out so fast today. It's not so much about getting around the edge as it is like using your rush angles, compressing the pocket, and being able to contain, bottle, and squeeze in the QB to generate pressure. Rousseau 1,000% fits into that mold. Yes. It's also just a matter of, can they give him that pass rush technique? Can they give him a pass rush plan? I had it in my notes independently, and then I also know you had it in your notes on your big board. That pass rush plan is a thing. Can they give him something so he knows, like, okay, here's my go-to move. This is what I need to do for my hand placement, reading those blocks, understanding the scenario, because he is young mentally, like chronologically in his age, but then also in his playing experience. There's not a ton. He doesn't have a lot of experience, so he's almost like a blank chalkboard and it's just a matter of what you can do with them. That's my only question about it. But he's got high character. I really like his ankle flexion, especially for a guy that big. And some of his lateral movement, it may not be the fastest or the most explosive, but he is very smooth in his movements, very coordinated. He hustles, good motor, again, good character guy. So if in a perfect world, and again, ideally, which I'm guessing the Bills did, like he seems like the type of guy, like if there was someone to reach the potential, he seems like the guy that could be it. My biggest qualm with it, you mentioned another person, Jason Owe. I like Rousseau. I liked Owe more. And that's not to say that I think Owe was a finished product at all. I thought he was a project as well. But his traits that he came with, I think he had a bit of a higher floor and more certainty to him than Rousseau does. But the ceiling for Rousseau, as we mentioned, is just so astronomically high. Like, again, if you're throwing out a comp there, if he can be like DeForest Buckner or like Eric Armstead, like good, those are kind of game wrecker guys that make a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, again, he doesn't necessarily play the game the way that those guys do, but I'm just talking more so from an overall size perspective, because it's hard to find almost a 6'7", 266-pound edge rusher able to do what he can do. And he does things just so different. And I think in a year where maybe there was a little bit more certainty, I think there was an opportunity for him to truly be the top edge rusher off the board. If he would have been able to play in 2020 all of that stuff, I think we might have seen him as the top edge rusher off the board. And again, I don't think his tape in 2019 was spectacular by any means, but again, when you talk just overall potential and what you can work with, there's a lot there. So I'm pumped for him. And I think, you mentioned pass rush plan. If anybody can go back and listen to his interview on the Move the Sticks podcast with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Books, it's just a great interview. And listening to him talking of how he worked out in Atlanta with, I want to say it was Chuck Smith. I could be wrong on the name. But yeah, working out with a guy like that and getting a defined pass rush plan, like he mentioned his weakness and he said, I need to get better at that. So it's like, okay, he gets it, he knows it, and he's going to do it. And I think he's ready to go, and I think he's hungry. So I'm pumped. I know Eric's going to be dropping a video. If he didn't today, sometime soon he's going to be dropping a video on Rousseau. And I know how much time he puts in those things, and those things are sick. So it's going to be a great video, and I hope everybody can check it out because it's going to be great.
Yeah, the breakdown will be great from Eric, as it always is. And Rousseau, it's always fun too, I think, to go into training camp and go into the preseason knowing that there's like rookies or guys you want to see. And I mean, I'm going to have my eyes on a lot of the rookies, but Rousseau especially, like I just want to start to see, has his hand placement changed a little bit? Is he using more technique or plan in everything he does? Like, I'm just going to be like hardcore staring at the TV, like every chance I get to see what he can do. Cause there is that ceiling is so high, and just seeing what he looks like in year one versus year two and versus year three. Cause again, that ceiling is so high. And I also think it makes sense. We talked about it a bit, taking somebody like that at 30, it's going to be tough to find somebody who's going to make a huge measurable impact for you right away in year one. In the draft in general, it's not an exact science, let alone as you get towards the end. So you take somebody who, you can bring along and who maybe potentially could be an all-pro in like 4 or 5 years and a solid contributor along the way, maybe even sooner if he reaches that ceiling.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited. And it's hard not to get excited when you look at him. Like, he's a monster of a man. Yeah. And again, you take that little bit of a ball of clay and you start to mold it and add some polish and some refinement to it.
Oh yeah.
Oh boy, it could be potent. So I like that for Rousseau. Second round comes along. This was very shocking when we were here on the live stream. My stream was ahead of yours and Anthony Romeo's, and I didn't want to spoil anything, but it took a lot for me not to let out an audible "what" when we took Basham. I was just
you put your head down though. You did put your head down. You were like, "What?"
And I just came back and was just quiet and just. And I'll lead on this and then pass it to you here. My biggest thing with Basham was, and I heard this in a couple different regards. I know his 2019 tape was much better than his 2020 tape was for a variety of reasons. There was talk that he potentially was not in the best of shape for 2020, played a little bit overweight. His 2019 tape was much better. I saw the 2020 tape and I liked some things, but I didn't like some other things. You and I made the joke offline, like with his nickname being Boogie, and just watching the 2020 tape, I was just like, why is his nickname Boogie? Like, I don't get it. Like, he's not doing anything of that nature. But it's an interesting pick, especially when you pair it with Rousseau, which I think you have to. Rousseau is this super high ceiling, super low floor prospect. Basham is almost on the other end. He's a bit of an older prospect. I believe he'll be 24 in December of this year. He's got a ton of experience, a ton of reps. He was a captain at Wake Forest, much higher floor. You almost know what you're going to get, but he's got a bit of a lower ceiling. And my biggest things for him were, I saw he goes to a swim move a lot for like almost all his moves, whether it's the run, whether it's run fits or pass. And when he does that, Eric and I were talking about it in the DMs, he has a tendency to get washed pretty easily. So he'll go for the swim and get caught and just get completely washed away. And then all of a sudden you got this gaping gap on the outside. He's got decent length, but not ideal. I wish we could somehow like put him and Rousseau's arms together in a pot and then like divvy them in half and then reattach them to both guys, because then it would be like perfect. He doesn't stack a lot against the lineman. He's not really getting them and like chucking and shedding. He tends to let them get a little too much inside to his body. And for as much of a power guy, especially when you look at the 2019 tape, Brian Baldinger did this awesome breakdown of Basham in 2019, where he was using his power and he was just converting speed to power to speed and all these kind of things, speed and vice versa. And I didn't see that a lot in 2020. I thought he had good hustle. I thought he took good pursuit angles. He was always moving, like a Bills type of guy, great motor, chasing everything down, taking good pursuit angles, rush angles, all that stuff. But I didn't think he used his power and his size as much as he could. I thought he could play with more leverage, use his hands more. And most of the time he was winning, it was just with pure effort, taking some good angles and some power. So I think he's another guy, again, teach him more technique, a little more refinement. But I think, where he is isn't necessarily where he's going to be, but he's got a higher floor, lower ceiling for a variety of reasons.
Completely agree. And when you mention, going to a swim move, I definitely think that's the thing that you see instantly. We talk versatility with Rousseau, which is a positive. You watch Basham and you see this swim move constantly, and you're like, okay, what is this? I can't deal with this. And I'll tell you this, I noticed it last summer. And then I had Craig Rowe on with me, who's a former Michigan defensive line coach. He, I think he's moving into the coaching world, but he played it in the CFL for like 7-8 years, and had him on, and we watched film together. We watched Kwity Paye, we watched Carlos Basham, and he mentioned, like, I'm noticing this swim move a lot. And I asked him, why, and you guys can go back and watch it. It's on the Cover One YouTube page, and, you'll find it in there. And, he mentioned like, that just might be what he's most comfortable with. And when a guy is in the college ranks, if he has kind of a defined move, some coaches might just stress, use what you trust and use with what you know. And I mean, obviously it's brought him production, right? Like he ended 33 and a half tackles for loss, 19 and a half, career sacks. So there's production, but really my biggest fear is he looked a bit heavy in 2020. And I said this before the show, like body type reminded me a little bit of either like, I compared him to Tack McKinley when he was coming out, but I think when I look at his body type, he just carried his weight weird, and he reminded me of Curtis Weaver last year coming out of Boise State, who had like this awkward body of like kind of top heavy almost in a way. And with Basham, it's just what you see is what you're going to get. That's what I truthfully believe. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope like on paper, and this is the thing, the comments are going to be loaded with it. Basham on one side, Basham on one side, move Epinesa inside and play Rousseau on the other side of Basham. Dude, this isn't Madden. It's not going to work like that. It's just not. Like, Basham is going to be, I think, limited to certain things. And I could be wrong. again, and on paper, it should work out, but I'm a little hesitant on Basham. I think where they got him, great value overall. Just simply because when that guy comes to you in the second round, I mean, he's 67th on my board. So really there wasn't much separating him and Rousseau for me. But again, I just think I think Basham is just somebody that, considering that you double down at the position and you look at some of the players after the fact, like Josh Myers, Creed Humphrey, especially talking interior offensive line, when you take 2 offensive tackles in this draft, like you could have took Brady Christensen out of BYU, and that could be like plug and play possibly at right tackle. So I look at that. I look at, I know on the stream we wanted Ifeatu Melifonwu quite a bit. He fell to the Lions, of course.
Yeah, he went to the Lions.
So, and it's going to be one of those things. You're going to look back on it and go, man, we could have had this guy, this guy, this guy. And this, to me, kind of defines that pick. There's always that one pick in the draft. This, for me, kind of feels like it. And again, the Bills have the luxury, and I've always said this, they have the luxury to do whatever you want, but I don't think you have the luxury to double down on defensive ends. I could be wrong. Go out and get the pass rushers, follow what the Bucs did, follow what teams are doing to get after the Chiefs. But at the end of the day, I don't know. I've just felt like there was a corner you could have taken. There was an offensive lineman you could have took, so.
That's the question where it like starts to break down. And Taylor, I see your question. We're going to get to that in a minute. That's a tremendous question. Of who else you could have had versus what you ended up with, I think it's like the big one, and that's going to make everyone like potentially kick themselves or not kick themselves based on what happens. And I think you were kind of spot on again with Basham. And again, in a vacuum, not even in a vacuum, I get it and I understand it. You mentioned Jerry Hughes. You also got Mario Addison. Both of those guys are unrestricted free agents in 2022. And then you got Epinesa, but you're still hoping he hits his ceiling. And then after Epinesa, you're really looking at your edge position like, what are we really going to get out of everyone in a defensive line that is super important in a Sean McDermott defense? Brandon Beane said multiple times after the draft, talking about how games are won up front and they believe in the defensive line aspect. So now seeing these picks back to back, I guess it makes a little more sense. But that was the thing of seeing who was available there and who you could have potentially brought in, like the Creed Humphrey. And Melifonwu going in the third was really nice. They still could have had him in the third when they ended up taking Spencer Brown, who we're going to speak about in a minute. And I liked the need of it for Basham. I get it. I'm interested to see what he does just from a development standpoint. Because again, he's got that high floor, the swim move aspect. He also, in a positive for him, and I saw this in some of his 2019 tape that Baldy broke down, but I saw it in 2020. He's got a spin move that I like, but he doesn't use it a lot. And I saw him use it 5 times over the span of 3 games, and he won with it every time. And I kept telling myself, like, dude, I literally wrote in my notes, I was like, spin move with a star, parentheses, use it more. And I wrote it in all caps. Like, he does it well. And I saw that made me more excited for his overall athleticism, because especially when you're looking at the scores, he ran well, he tested well, but he was one of those guys that I didn't necessarily think, at least in 2020, and it makes sense when you talk about the weight in hindsight, but I didn't think he played as fast or as athletic as the testing or the scores indicated. Now you look in 2019, it makes more sense. Like 2019 looks like a guy who's nicknamed Boogie. 2020 does not as much. But I think if you can get him into an NFL program, again, another dude who's a leader, good head on his shoulders, get him with the proper weight training, diet, technique, polish, refinement, I think he's somebody who could contribute. And Jason made the comment, this is a popular thing. I 100% think Shaq Lawson when I see Boogie. That's been a popular comp all over the interwebs over the last week or so, that Basham is a Shaq Lawson comp. And to be honest, if that's what he turned out to be, I would take that. Give me a guy who can set the edge, who competes, who will get you 7 to 9-ish sacks, depending on what's going on in the game. I'll take that if you get that out of Basham. And he's an interesting player. That double dip that you mentioned, though, that was the thing. It was, especially when it came and who else was on the board. It was just like, oh, man, we just took Rousseau. What's the thought? And this is a great question for you, Russ, from Taylor. So he's asking, was Rousseau 58th on your board? Was he a reach? And was Basham 67th a smaller reach? Again, both of those based on your draft guide.
Yes and no. I think really the value kind of fits in both spots. Obviously, the numbers say otherwise, but again, I think if Rousseau would have played in 2020, like I said, I think if he would have played, he would have been higher on my board. But I have to go off of just really what 2019 showed, and he didn't play a ton in 2018. And you look at everything in a whole, and it's like, there's stuff there. So it makes sense. So I guess part of it, it's just I've justified the reason in my head to why they took him at 30 and why they took Basham. So I don't think they're really reaching at either point, because again, I don't think they would have got Rousseau at 62. Yep. And they would have had to move up to get him, and then we'd all be complaining, well, they had to trade X, Y, and Z to get Greg Rousseau. What the hell are we doing? Yep. So, I'm cool with it. I understand it now. It all makes sense. But again, I still don't understand doubling down. That doesn't make sense to me. Other than you're just trying to, maybe the rich get richer in a sense. But we'll see what happens. You put up Ron Beck. He said, "What up? What's going on, Ron?" Always love what I always like what Ron's got to say in the chats. So
I like Ron's comment too that he's saving the spin move for the NFL. I like that, kind of like keep it as like a hidden weapon. I tell you what's also interesting with the Basham pick is hearing after that was taken that Bean had a trade in the works and it was ready to go down, but it wasn't going to happen if their guy. They told him like we'll do it, but if our guy is on the board when we pick, it's not going to happen. Basham was that guy that was on the board. So I think it's a very interesting piece to know they took Rousseau in the first round. Their guy almost like the entire second round was Basham. Like they had him earmarked, they had him pinpointed, and to know that they had, I made the comment on Twitter, it's similar to when the Bills moved up for Josh Allen. They had that potential deal with the Broncos, and the Broncos were like, yeah, we'll do it, but we got a guy who, if he's there, we're not doing the trade. And that guy ended up being Bradley Chubb. Chubb dropped. They took Chubb, no trade. Very interesting that Basham was their guy, whether it was value or whether the double dip was 1,000% on their mind, knowing that they had a trade offer and nixed it because Basham was the target for, you got to think, at least a decent amount or a decent majority of that second round. That's a very interesting thing. That means he was a guy that they really, really, really wanted it. It wasn't even so much how the board fell, other than this is our target, this is who we want. That's a really interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, it is too. And I mean, I don't know, man. I think, again, if these are the guys that obviously they're bored, their picks are their picks now, right? But if those were their top two guys and that's just how it is, and I mean, I'm really curious to see how it all works out. I'm fingers crossed. I'm praying for the best because I want to see. I want to see this team go to the next level. And I think, I love watching defensive football. So being able to see Sean McDermott get his hands on two guys like this, you talk about ball of clay. Well, I think, he might be able to get his hands on this and kind of develop these guys a little bit more. So we'll see what happens. I mean, it's not just Sean McDermott, it's the whole coaching staff, and it's the guys in front of them that can teach them, from, Jerry Hughes and even a younger veteran, like an AJ Epinesa or, whoever. So we'll see what happens. But I can't. I can fault them for double downing and going or double dipping on the picks. But at the same time, if Basham is the guy that they truly wanted the whole time, then clearly they've got a plan, they've got a vision. So we'll see what they do.
Yeah, and I think that's spot on. Like I recognize the need, or I guess like the thought behind the double dip. The Bills rotate a ton on the defensive line. You want quality. You need quality and depth across that line so you can keep everyone fresh. Rotate, combined with the fact that you need to get younger at the position. I get it. It makes sense. And I actually like this comment from Ron as we start to move into the third and fourth picks for the Bills draft. The top four picks for the Bills were all at premium positions, but it was an odd draft. I think that's a decently spot-on comment from Ron.
That's actually a really good point too. And see, this is why I love Ron, because he's always bringing up great stuff. But see, this is another thing too. Like, say money gets tight, right? Like you got Allen on the books. You've still got, let's say, Diggs on the books. You got other guys on the books coming up and everything else. And maybe a guy like Rousseau just takes a huge step forward. He's producing 12, 15 sacks a year. Basham's doing 8 to 10 sacks a year. Well, maybe, you got Edmonds on your cap. You got Milano there. You got Trey White. You just got so much money tied up. Okay, well, one of those guys kind of become expendable, even if you don't want them to. And if you can generate, let's say, a pick like Basham, who you took 62nd overall, and if you can turn that into pick, pick 17 in the 2015 NFL draft or whatever it is, you turn it into a first-round pick, then I think you can kind of justify and say, wow, like that, we got a great return out of that because you can't pay them. And if a team is in need of an edge rusher at that point in time down the road, then maybe that's the guy you move for extra draft capital down the road. So again, we don't know what the cap hits will look like down the road. I mean, obviously Greg Thompson will, because the guy's a maniac, but other than that, like we'll see what happens. So that's a good point though. That's a great point. Two premier positions with 4 players makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And you hit it. I love the cap talk. Greg is the senior resident capologist. I'm a junior man on the account. I do talk cap. And that's you hit it on the head. Like Allen's going to get a huge deal. If Tremaine Edmonds gets re-upped, he's not going to sign, the richest linebacker contract in history, but he would get decently paid. Milano is getting paid. You got Trey White. You're going to need to have premium positions that are filled by guys on affordable contracts. And if you've got 2 edge rushers who hit their ceiling, Rousseau sitting there, minimum 4 years. You got that 5th-year option because he's a first-round pick. Basham, minimum 4 years. Same thing with the offensive lineman. You all of a sudden start to create some depth and rotation at positions where you're not going to be able to spend a ton of money in free agency. Exactly to your point. We kind of know decently what this core is for the Bills going forward. At the very least, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Tre'Davious White. Those 3 dudes are going to be paid very, very legitimately because they're paid to that regard. That means, this would never happen, but if somehow Myles Garrett hits the free agent market, the Bills aren't going to be able to pay for Myles Garrett. They're not going to be able to pay for some kind of, if Khalil Mack somehow hits, they're not going to be able to spend the money on that kind of guy unless they take some ridiculous deal because they think they can win a championship there or whatever, some kind of random one-off thing. So in order to fill those, those premium positions, you got to hit them in the draft. So that's where the double dip, as you mentioned, as Ron mentioned, and we've talked about already, I think that's where the double dip comes from in the first 2 picks. And then we go to picks 3 and 4. We're going to start with the third, and we get another double dip. We get offensive tackle, offensive line double dipping. First one, Spencer Brown, offensive tackle out of Northern Iowa. This one, for me, I think it's pure project as of this point. Yes. I've seen some things for people, and I just want everyone to pump the brakes a little bit. I know that's Aaron Quinn's catchphrase. Darrell Williams had a phenomenal year last year, and I just think it's a little premature for the people that are like, well, Spencer Brown makes Darrell Williams expendable. Or you know what? Kick Darrell Williams into guard and let Spencer Brown play at right tackle. Yeah. He doesn't have a ton of snaps. He's only got 33 starts at the FCS level over 3 seasons because he played at University of Northern Iowa. He did not play in 2020. But he is another ball of clay. He's almost like a tackle version of Greg Rousseau, but even more elite traits. The guy got a 10 out of 10 on his relative athletic score, which is super rare. Just speed, power, size. He is going to have some of the issues because of his height, because he is 6'8" and he's 311 pounds. He will have those a bit of issues of, sometimes bending and leverage things and that, but he bends well for his size. He's aggressive. He's quick. He's stupid strong. There's all these videos of him basically ripping houses out of their foundation because he can bench 1,000,000 pounds. He's just an athletic freak. He's got an elite athleticism, and he's the guy who, I don't care when he sees the field. I like the idea that people have floated of him being the Lee Smith blocking tight end this year, and also because he used to be a tight end, maybe he can catch some passes, and because he's so athletic. But I am fine with him just sitting, not doing anything, being a starter maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, but just literally, he is pure, almost ball of clay. Teach him some technique. Let's see what we can get. But really exciting based on the traits that he carries and the elite. I can't say it enough. His athleticism is stupid good.
Yeah, it really is. And I will say this, it's funny when I look at this and I look back at this draft, it's almost like the Bills knew that there was going to be a run on particular positions. You look in the first round, they took an edge rusher and Rousseau. The next 2 picks, an edge rusher. You come here into 3rd round, you go 93rd overall, you take Spencer Brown, who I'm going to be honest, I didn't think was going to be here this late. So I didn't watch him in depth. Like I only watched him a little bit when, watching North Dakota State and those types of games. But outside of that, I didn't watch him a ton. That being said, you take him at 93. The next pick is Ben Cleveland. The following pick after that is Robert Hainsey. So you start seeing a run on offensive linemen. And it's like, okay, so their board kind of fell into place of what the NFL was probably going to do. So maybe they were a little bit ahead of the curve or ahead of the game a little bit of, hey, we're going to know what's going to happen here. But, with Spencer Brown, you say it and you can't say it enough. Elite athleticism. The guy is a freak just a freak athlete at 6'8", 311 to move the way he does is phenomenal. So when you look at it from, we talk Greg Rousseau, how can a team stop a player like Greg Rousseau? Well, you get a guy like a Spencer Brown with that type of length to try to match it, right? So to have that length is going to be huge. Now, again, he's going to have to find ways to keep guys a little bit, I think, I don't want to say closer to his body because it's hard to block consistently when you're constantly locked out. But that being said, like he's got the athleticism to do a lot of certain things that just most offensive linemen can't do. So he's not going to come in and play right away. He's going to come in, he's going to learn. And if that means next year, Cody Ford bumps inside and Spencer Brown's your starting right tackle, by all means, I think that's fine. So I was okay with this pick because I think there's a lot to work with. And I know a lot of people that said if they could take an FCS level type of player or just a developmental tackle in the mid rounds, this was the guy that they were going to take because there's just too much to work with. Now, I will say, going back to his days in high school, he did break his leg. Going back to 2018, he had the MCL injury, which basically limited him to only 5 games. So there is some lower body concerns as far as health. And I always say this with players, especially more so skilled players, like corners and stuff like that. When you get those guys with those lower body ailment injuries, they tend to reoccur. They tend to come back up and pop back up. So when that happens, it's concerning. But when you get a player like Spencer Brown, who again has shown that he can take his game to the next level, I think it's huge. So I truthfully think if he would have had a whole year this past year, like some other players, I think he would have gone much sooner. I really do. So I liked what I saw from him in the Senior Bowl. I thought from pass protection wise, he held up very well. He wasn't losing a bunch, to power. He wasn't losing to a bunch of speed. Again, he was holding his own. I think there's definitely times where he could probably improve his angles a little bit in the run game, and getting maybe up to the second level could be a little bit cleaner. But again, with the athleticism, that it can all be teach. If you have a guy that can't move his feet like a basketball player and they can't move the way that you need them to move, they're going to be kind of stuck into one spot and they're not going to be able to grow. But this, he can. And I think this is somebody that in 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we're going to say, wow, Spencer Brown was, I don't want to say a steal at 93, but if he's starting, I could see it 6-7 years from now, the guy plays 78 consecutive games or something like that at right tackle. And I'm not trying to be hot takey or too rich here, but I really think this guy can develop. So the first pick and this pick, I liked a lot.
Very nice. Yeah, I like this pick too. And I want to get your thoughts on this other aspect for Brown. Some people, I think it's just, you look at the Bills' offensive line and the biggest question marks are at both guard spots. And so people have talked about potentially like, oh, hey, can Spencer Brown kick into guard? Can Spencer Brown kick into guard? And we'll have this conversation about Tommy Doyle as well. For me, I would love it if Spencer Brown could play guard. But because of his height and his frame, I am a bit concerned that he's going to give up leverage too much if he was kicked inside the guard. So I don't think, not that it can't happen. I think it's a lower likelihood of potentially happening, but what do you potentially think on if there was a shot of Spencer Brown being able to kick inside?
I don't like guards 6'8". I'm just going to put it
fair
that
enough.
way.
Same thought.
Like there's a threshold, and guard, like people complain about moving Rashawn Slater inside guard at 6'3.5", 6'4".
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, I can justify moving that kid into guard. Spencer Brown, I can't have a guy that size, a hog molly of that size or that stature to play inside. It just doesn't make sense. Like in a pinch, maybe. Like in the middle of a game, we're late in December, we need this win, and both starting guards went down and we got nothing.
Right.
Okay. But to be my everyday guard, I think it's asinine. I think you play that kid at right tackle. People are saying swing tackle, go for it, whatever you need to do. But at the end of the day, I'm playing him at right tackle. And like we said, we got to get Greg Rousseau in a set plan, Carlos Basham in a set plan. By all means, we got to get Spencer Brown in a set. He's got to have a set role for me. And I'm not saying like these guys can't learn multiple positions, and it's key to have multiple positions. But for a player like Spencer Brown to get where you want him to be, he's got to have that defined role. And I think that defined role is at right tackle. And I think that will help a player like Cody Ford. That should be goal number one here with Spencer Brown and Tommy Doyle. Getting Cody Ford comfortable at guard and alleviate the pressure of him not having to worry about playing right tackle anymore, because nobody wants him to play right tackle. Don't lie to me and say that you do, because I know nobody does. Everybody wants him at right guard. So play his ass at right guard and play Tommy Doyle and Spencer Brown at right tackle.
I like that a lot. I think that's a key thing too. I think that gets lost sometimes with people and prospects is like setting them up for success and getting them into a design plan or a design structure, so you can start to bring out those traits and refine them and add that NFL caliber ability. When you've got a guy who is inexperienced and is just raw project, you don't want to just throw so many things on his plate and put him in situations where he might not succeed. Let's teach him this one thing, get him to be solid, and then build from there. If he could be a swing tackle, I'd love it. But I really like the idea. My thought really for Spencer Brown and what he was drafted to be, especially with that Darrell Williams contract, which is 3 years, you're looking at Spencer Brown and maybe he's the future right tackle if Darrell Williams either doesn't pan out or he finishes his deal and Spencer Brown is already there. Maybe he's the one who takes that mantle when Darrell Williams is done here. But again, either way, I don't think Spencer, barring, knock on wood, barring catastrophe, I don't think he's starting on the offensive line until at least 2 or 3 years down the road. But again, there's a lot to like with the traits and everything that he can do. And there's a decent amount to like for the next pick that the Bills had. Again, we mentioned it already. Another double dip. Tommy Doyle, offensive tackle from Miami of Ohio. My favorite thing for Doyle, he's similar in the mold to Brown. He's also 6'8". He's 320 pounds. He had 30 starts. I like him more as the swing tackle. He had 16 starts at left tackle in college. He had 14 starts at right tackle. He's comfortable at both spots. Much like Brown, I feel like we're describing almost the same person again. He's long, he's athletic, he is aggressive, he's powerful, he's physical in the run. I thought he had more leverage and bendable issues and then just technique things as well, like similar to Brown and also a bit similar to Rousseau, even though they're offensive versus defensive line, hand placement, technique, how are you thrusting, are you getting to your spot, moving your feet, keeping your feet, how are you opening up your chest. But again, I think those are things that are going to come at the NFL level, coaching. But he's very similar to Brown in the fact of like he is older than Brown, so he's maybe the ceiling isn't as high, but you got another dude who's a monster of a man, decently athletic, not as athletic as Brown because he's elite, but with, ball of clay moldability.
Oh, no doubt about it. And the crazy thing is that this dude was a hockey player growing up. Like
I didn't know that.
It's crazy. Like he played at Edna High School in Minnesota, former hockey player, obviously goes and plays football and excels there. And he goes to Miami, Ohio, and he's successful there. Right. So I went and I've watched him a little bit, over the last probably week or so, not too much in detail and nothing too crazy. But just like, you see, he pops out on the tape because he's just so damn big. He's super tall. He's a monster. But I thought like efficient with his hands. I thought there was definitely times though he could finish his blocks a little bit. Like he would definitely give that guy that push, that extra shove, but then he would kind of lay off a little bit. And it's like, dude, I want to see that nasty side. Like you're 6'8", 320 pounds. Like put that dude down, get rid of him, you know? So again, I think there's a lot to work with here, but it's a 5th round tackle. It's hard to say if this guy is going to develop into anything more than just more of a depth pick. And obviously when you look at like the board a little bit, I always like looking back at the board.
Yeah.
Seeing Garrett Wallow sit there at 170, go to Houston. I think Garrett Wallow would have been great in Buffalo as kind of like Matt. I don't want to say Matt Milano 2.0, but in a similar role, somebody that if Milano can't stay healthy, it kind of throws off the defense a little bit. And you ask guys to play, you play guys in different spots. Garrett Wallow might be somebody that you could develop into there. So again, I like Tommy Doyle. I wouldn't have doubled down at offensive tackle here. I think with just so much focus over the last few off seasons on offensive linemen, you took an offensive tackle. You didn't need to necessarily do so here. And again, you could have taken a guard or a center if you felt like you needed to add an offensive lineman, add to the interior, stop adding 6'8" tackles. But yeah, I love Wallow. He's a former safety, so I would have loved to seen him here. How excited were you seeing, and I want to ask you this, and I know some people were off on him, but Shaun Wade was sitting there at 160 and you got the next pick coming up. Would you have been like, hey, I would take Shaun Wade at 161?
Or you do
not like Shaun Wade?
No. Here, I'll give you the story of what it is. I was on the Cover One podcast with Greg. It was Greg and I hosting. And we had Bruce Nolan on to do a mock draft, and Bruce took Shaun Wade in the 5th round.
Oh boy.
And I liked it. I thought I was on the same exact page as Bruce. I think Shaun Wade at nickel can be a very legit thing. Put him at the outside, I don't think he can succeed. I think his 2020 proved it. But 2019 Shaun Wade in the nickel is a fantastic thing. And I was staring at the TV because we hadn't taken a corner yet, and I wanted a corner in this draft, and I was just going, Shaun Wade, Shaun Wade, Shaun Wade. And he gets taken right there. And I yelled at my TV, and my wife asked me what happened, and I was like, you won't understand. And I was just upset. I just sat and I just stared at the TV. Yeah, I thought his value, my plan, if you could get Shaun Wade in the middle rounds, I figured he'd go somewhere. At the earliest, I thought somebody would grab him in the 4th. Low chance that maybe someone grabs him in the 3rd, but I doubt it. I thought 5th round was going to be sweet. I would have gladly taken Shaun Wade at nickel, and I think he can start in the NFL at nickel and then be long-term. Dude, I was really upset.
I saw, like, obviously I watched every pick like everybody else, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, dude, Shaun Wade's going to fall right to Buffalo and they're going to swoop in. And then he went to Baltimore, and I go, of course he goes to Baltimore. Like, of anywhere he's going to go and thrive, it's going to be Baltimore.
And then I was sitting there still upset that, granted, we got Rousseau, but the Ravens got Owe, and I was like, oh, great, you guys just took Owe, and then, oh, great, you just take Shaun Wade. I was so mad.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. But no, so back to Tommy Doyle. Yeah, like, look, developmental piece you might get some starts out of him at right tackle in a pinch or whatever. He might move inside to guard. I don't like the thought of a 6'8" guard, but it is what it is. That being said, though, like, I don't love the pick. I don't like I just don't like doubling down on the same position in the parts of the draft where I feel like you didn't need to. Like, you already took the offensive tackle, just like you already took the edge. So I get their plan on the edge rusher stuff, like you alluded to, kind of, but going to this, like, they can't justify this to me because I can't wrap my head around going Spencer Brown, Tommy Doyle, both just too raw for my liking to take them both back to back. Now, again, if you would have got some of these other pieces and Tommy Doyle sitting there in the 6th, 7th round, okay, sure. But you took them back to back, and like, you're picking late enough in these drafts already. There's a run on talent just flying by you. And that's what just makes it hard for me looking at this from a outside perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And it's been said several times, now, and Greg Thompson has tweeted it out. I think he tweeted like on Sunday, the day after. The first 4 picks, and really the draft as a whole, but especially the first 4, are such a complete confirmation of Brandon Beane's draft strategy being best player available, because it almost doesn't matter like if it is at the same position, because it's like, well, the best player on our board is this. We're doing this again. The first 4 picks, again, they are, primary positions, but you double dip on edge, you double dip on tackles, and you hit another nail on the head. I think it's very interesting. Of these first 4 picks that we described, Basham is almost the only sure thing to me. Like Rousseau could be amazing. He could be kind of meh. Spencer Brown could develop into a really sweet thing or not so much. Same thing with Doyle a little. Basham is really the only one who has like, okay, we can kind of project this one with no projection is ever certain, but he's the one we can almost project with the most certainty. But the other 3, there's a very legitimate amount of variability and kind of wild card status to each of the 3 of the first 4 picks, which is also, I think, another interesting thing for Bills fans, because it's almost like it's granted Beane, his presser before the draft was, we're thinking long-term, not short, but 3 of these 4 picks are almost purely like two years and beyond long-term, not even just like, oh, next year. It's like long-term in the future.
Yeah. No doubt about it. So, I mean, we'll see. I'm seeing a lot of stuff in the chat, big names never work out, and trust Beane and company, and et cetera. And look, I'm with you guys. I'm not saying they needed to go with the biggest name on the board, but I'm just saying it would have been sweet if Sean Wade would have fell to their lap. But also, I would have taken Garrett Wallow out of TCU instead of Tommy Doyle, because that's not a big name. But that's just me. That's how I'm drafting. I'm not sitting there. I'm not in the AFC Championship game. I got a Lions fathead sitting in front of me. I'm a loser, so don't listen to me.
Ooh, here's a question: will Rousseau be better than Epinesa?
Yes.
What about by what year? Like right out of the gate, or by like 2022 he will be?
Both.
Oh, so you're saying Rousseau will be better than Epinesa this upcoming year in 2021?
I think so.
Ooh, I like it.
I could be wrong, but I don't know, man. AJ Epinesa has been like so iffy for me. And I thought like he was going to be a lot better, and he fell for a reason, and the Bills took him, and I thought it was a great spot, but I just haven't seen enough to be like, I don't know. It just, I
like Epinesa. I like him a lot, but I don't like him as like, I don't think he's going to be this guy who's going to put up like 15 sacks a year. I think Rousseau has a ceiling where he could put up like 13 sacks a year. I think Epinesa is more of your grinder. He's going to set the edge. He's going to hustle his butt off. He's going to get some tackles. He's going to do a lot of the dirty work. And then maybe he pulls off, like a 10 sack season here or there. But I think the ceiling I think the ceiling for Epinesa is still there, but the ceiling for Rousseau is like elite game wrecker type of thing. Whereas Epinesa, it's more like really strong quality starter, but Rousseau's ceiling is like elite player.
Yeah. Watch AJ Epinesa just come out and put up like 17 and a half sacks this year.
Dude.
Which, cool. I hope so.
I would love that. Give me whatever. Put Spencer Brown at guard and he becomes an all-pro guard. I don't care if we're wrong. If it leads to a Bills Super Bowl, I do not care. I will take whatever it is.
I would probably have to leave cover one at that point, but it is what it is. So,
or the same thing if all of a sudden like Basham is just like the most amazing athlete ever and he's just tearing it up. I would just like slowly that what's the Homer Simpson gif of him like just slowly back in the bushes. It was exactly that would be, especially after you mentioned it, like the live stream we took him and I was just like, oh yeah. It was a little tough for me. Next pick, fun pick, offensive pick, skill position, Marquez Stevenson, wide receiver, Houston. I don't think there's, at this point now, especially with how many videos have been circling the old interwebs, man, just speed for days, speed, tons of speed, also more speed. He's got a lot of speed. Officially clocked in at like a 4.45 40, but I also heard that there was wind resistance and he wasn't pleased with it. And all his like prep 40s, he ran in the 4.3s, which makes sense because when you watch the film, he's a burner. He separates when he gets the ball in his hands. I love his yards after catch. I love his kick return potential. He's only got 34 for his career, but 26.3 average, 3 touchdowns. He did have a decent amount of injuries. Broke his collarbone in 2016, tore his ACL in 2017. He had an ankle injury in 2020, but a legit vertical threat, a great 3-cone time, speed for days, yards after catch, big play potential. I was completely fine with this pick where they took him middle of the draft, closer to the back end of the draft, but middle of day 3, speed for days. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'll start with the negatives here, just so I don't get Bills Mafia up in a roar here. But the injuries are concerning, no doubt about it. To have three seasons filled and littered with injuries, like, I mean, if I got to pinpoint to certain players about their injuries and I got to hold it against them, I'm going to hold it against this guy, whether he's wearing a Bills jersey or not. So yeah, I'm a little worried there. But outside of that, the fact that he was able to kind of bounce back from those injuries and still run a 40 time the way that he did, and probably knowing that he could still run in the 4.3s is insane to me. So, he's nicknamed Speedy, nicknamed that for a good reason. And I think he's one of those guys, obviously going to be a special teams guy. You're going to have him returning kicks, returning punts, and just doing that type of thing. And he might get a little bit sprinkled in a little bit to do some of maybe the Isaiah McKenzie stuff and get some of those, jet sweeps and, jet wheel routes and be wide open for Josh Allen down the sideline and stuff. But it's a depth pick. And this is more so about special teams, which is fine because there's value there. And I don't think he's going to come in and take Cole Beasley's job. I don't think he's going to be the slot receiver. I'm sorry, I just don't. I could be wrong. He could come in and just become this absolute beast. But again, I don't necessarily see that. I think with the 3 receivers you currently have, I think that's fine. And I think with this guy, with the injuries, and again, he mentions a limited route tree, he's more of that vertical threat. That's fine. You can have a guy like that, but he's not going to come out and catch you 100 passes. He's not going to come out and catch you 70 passes. Again, he might prove me wrong, but he's a special teams guy, and that's okay because you needed a guy like that, and you got him where you were supposed to get him, and that's fine. It fits perfect to where you got him, so I can live with it. I'm excited about the pick because special teams matter, and if you can get this offense in a better spot and possibly score, I mean, that's awesome. So
yeah, I'm interested to see what he can become. I like the kick return ability. I believe for punts he only had 8 career punt returns, but I'm excited if he can do that as well. But I got no problems, like, again, taking a guy on day 3 who is just a burner and a vertical threat, especially when you're adding it to, granted, we want to see this wide receiver core is going to look very different in the next 2 to 3 years. But right now you're sitting there with Diggs, Sanders, and Beasley as your top 3, arguably the best route running trio of receivers in the NFL, but not the most, fleet of foot when it comes to vertical speed. So you add a guy, I would love if Stevenson had a great route tree and could do all these things, but I'm also fine with a guy who can just run like a 4.3 and I'll be like, yo, bro, just run straight down the field and Josh Allen might throw it 70 yards to you and just open some things up underneath. Granted, it's never that simple, but adding that dynamic combined with the kick return ability and the special team aspect, like you said, I think where they got him, it's hard to be upset at it. Like, I'm not going to complain at all. And I think that's a fine ad, especially with what he can do. And especially too, we're still sitting here now. I know the thoughts are, and I'm seeing it come in the chat, the thoughts of Isaiah McKenzie being the return man, which he potentially could do. When Isaiah McKenzie was the full-time return man in Denver and even a bit with Buffalo, he has had some fumble issues. He's a better punt returner than he is kick returner. There's still the thoughts now, like, is Matt Breida going to return kicks and McKenzie returns the punts? Like, can we consolidate that position into one thing? I think it's a very legitimate thing. Roberts, even though we had to dress him on game day and he was a receiver but didn't function to that aspect, he was all pro returner level, and that makes a big difference. And I will fight anyone who says it's not valuable. Having somebody who can add you an extra 8 to 10 yards per return, add that up, that's a big difference. It makes a big deal. And if Stevenson could somehow turn into that, I'd love it. But I like the idea, even if he's just a really good special teamer, cool, good day 3 pick. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, no doubt.
There it is. That is the stat. Yeah, he returned 4 punts, and I think he had 4 fair catches. It's something random or weird like that. So that's Marquez Stevenson. And now we start to move into the part of the draft that was my favorite, part of the draft. Aaron Quinn said it last night on the Cover One Buffalo podcast. Well, and for me personally, I like defensive backs. I love the defensive side of the football. It's my favorite thing. Demar Hamlin, safety out of Pittsburgh, somebody who was on the board for a very long time. And I think Greg also mentioned it on Twitter that he was like Mel Kiper's best available for like 3.5 hours. And he was just on the top of the board, on the top of the board, on the top of the board, not being taken. 6 foot, almost 6'1", 200 pounds, isn't the most athletic. He's not the fastest, but he's aggressive. He's a smart player. He's a heady player. He's almost like a safety version of Dane Jackson for the Bills, who was like, he's not the fastest. He's not the most athletic, but he plays hard, got a good head on his shoulders. He's aggressive. Here's a key thing, though, that I thought was very interesting. So I looked up his snaps by position just because I wanted to see what his versatility could be, right? So in 2020, he had 179 snaps in the box, 424 snaps in the slot, only 59 snaps at free safety, and then he had 56 special team snaps. So I like the special team snaps. But all this talk of like safety, he's more box and slot than he is free safety. And those numbers are also reflected in 2019 when he had 174 box snaps, 550 snaps in the slot, 51 free safety snaps, and 60 special team snaps. The Bills kept talking about, Bills fans especially, this whole big nickel thing, big nickel. And I know a lot of people wanted Hamza Nasruddin. Hamlin could potentially be that guy, given his snap count in college. Where he projects in the NFL is a bit of a different thing. But I thought it was a very interesting pick, especially from a versatility standpoint, especially when I went back and looked at it, because I was yelling at my TV for Trill Williams every single pick after Marquez Stevenson. And then you get Hamlin, who has a bit of versatility. What are your thoughts on Hamlin?
You know, this is a player that I didn't watch a ton of, because simply watching players like Rashad Weaver, Patrick Jones, you get through that entire secondary and then you're like, man, I got to get to Demar Hamlin still. But either way, this is actually one of my favorite picks from this kind of grouping of, rounds 5, 6, and 7. And I think this guy can come in and really play. I love the way he flies downhill, and that's something I had written down. He flies downhill with ease. He's disruptive. I mean, I think I had him with 25 pass deflections. He had 5 interceptions. So he showed great ball skills. I thought he was just overall he's not a high-end prospect. There's not a ton to work with there, but he's just so technically sound of a player that it's like there's too much to like to not take him. And I'm really excited for where he fits in this defense. I know I said, I would take Garrett Wallow and kind of have him clone Matt Milano. I'm not saying Hamlin's going to come in and put on 25 pounds. I don't think it's going to be the case, but he's 6'1", 200. I think he could add probably close to, I don't want to say 10 pounds because that's probably a little much, but if he could put on close to 5 to 10 pounds, then I think you could play him consistently to the box a little bit. And this is somewhat of like their poor man's, McDermott and Bean, they were there in Carolina when they took Shaq Thompson, right? Well, I think this could kind of be your poor man version of that. In a sense, but he was injured, he was banged up a little bit in 2016, 2017, and 2019. So I think there's he could be hit or miss. He definitely, I think, brings special teams value. He brings positional versatility because you can play him everywhere. But again, there's just so much like with how he comes down the field, he attacks. I think you can set him on blitzes. You can disguise him in different ways. And with how well he keys the quarterback, I mean, there's a lot to work with. So I'm gonna say that can he develop? Absolutely. Could he become a starter? Yes. Is he maybe like Dean Marlowe? Maybe. Is he, where does he ultimately fit? We'll see. But I do like this pick a lot. It was definitely my favorite from rounds 5 through 7.
Oh, nice. Yeah, this was my second favorite from those rounds. And yeah, I like everything you said. He's just the guy who, it's funny. I was watching the pit tape for Jones and Weaver, and then I watched the safeties because I remember early in 2020, maybe even in like August, there were some mock drafts that had Paris Ford as the number one safety on the board. And then come draft time, he's nowhere to be found. And so I started going to the tape and I was like, man, why was Paris Ford terrible? And then I wanted to see Ford. And then even in watching Jones and Weaver, I would see Hamlin from time to time.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is like, he keeps flashing. He keeps doing stuff. And he's not flashy. He's not the most athletic. He's not the fastest. He's just like a good football player. Like, I don't think he's going to take over a position and elevate the whole defense. I also don't think he's going to be a hole if you put him in the defense. I think he can just be a quality starter. He gets to learn behind one of the best safety tandems in the NFL in Hyde and Poyer. He gets to get great coaching. And for all the people, again, they have those comments of, Marlowe, I think that's a really good fit. I think Marlowe was more boxy and physical. I think Hamlin has better coverage ability and ball skills than Marlowe. Hamlin has to finish on his ball skill opportunities. But yeah, he's just a good football player. And you mentioned he comes from Pitt. Good pedigree. They coach up defense so well there. They play hard there. It's a good mentality of a program to come from. I thought this pick was really strong, and I like it. I like that it was your favorite from rounds 5 through 7.
And I will say, too, with Paris Ford, if he had not tested so poorly, I think his testing was god-awful.
Yeah,
it's
it was
like
awful.
it's like you look at it, and it's like, okay, what were you doing for this offseason? Yeah, like what happened? Yeah. But no, I'm excited for Hamlin, no doubt about it. So we'll see what happens with him, obviously. It's a 6th round pick.
Same. 6th round pick. Now we move on to my favorite pick of this draft. And it's not just because of the name, but I will say, I said it on Twitter, and I'll say it again now. The name is up there. I want him to be good so bad because I want a jersey that says Wild Goose. I just want it so unbelievably bad. But from just a pure, analysis standpoint, there's 2 things that I really like about him. One, he runs a 4.41, and at 5'11", 197, I like that. I like the speed injection into the Bills defense. Well, there's 3 things. I like that. I like his scheme versatility. I think he can play a little man. I think he's stronger in zone, especially in the short zone and the hook curls and the flats and all that type of stuff. But again, looking up the snaps, I really, really like this. So in 2020, he got hurt. He had a shoulder injury. He had 2 snaps in the slot, 54 snaps at the outside corner. I was like, okay, so they were moving him to outside corner in 2020. You go back to 2019, he had 29 snaps in the box, 349 snaps in the slot, 142 out wide. So in 2019, he was more functional as a nickel slot guy. 2020, you think something happens. Okay, they're going to try him at outside corner. Maybe he translates. So I went back to 2018, similar thing to what looked like 2020 was going to be. He had 39 snaps in the box, 141 in the slot, 296 at outside corner. So in 2018, he's kind of splitting time between both, but he's more outside than he is nickel. 2019, he's way more nickel than he is outside. And then 2020, they go to move him back to outside again. I like the positional versatility. Similar to Hamlin, I like that he comes from a good pedigree at Wisconsin. Jim Leonard is one of my favorite football players of all time, a guy who wasn't a physical beast, but was so smart and played with good technique and was in good position. He was super underrated for the Ravens defense, and he made a big difference for the Jets defense when Rex Ryan brought him over and when he took over. I like what he does in the short areas, in the short zone, the hook curls, and the flats. He doesn't have a ton of tape, and he will play out of control from time to time. He will be ultra aggressive, which is fun sometimes because he comes up and just makes a play. But other times, he's going to bite on fakes, and his eyes will mislead him. His recognition could take some coaching up, and just that risk-taking gambling that'll leave him way out of position and get burned. But I like his potential to do something in this defense because he offers something the Bills don't really have right now. The Bills don't have a guy. I guess Trey could potentially kick inside, but the Bills don't really have a guy with that level of comfortability in the nickel and in the outside spot combined with the speed. He's fast. He's aggressive. He can play nickel. He can play outside, and he's got a fantastic name. So he was my favorite pick in this aspect. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and rightfully so, right? Like, you draft a guy with the last name Wild Goose. I think he's one of those players that needs to trust his athleticism because there's far too many times where either he starts like trailing and like has to get just too physical to like make up for it, or just he gets way too physical and doesn't know how to lay off, which I'm fine with, me personally, but he's going to get called for it every single time in the NFL. He had a ton of penalties in college, but I'm with you there. Working in zone, I think he can do those responsibilities, whether it's in the short zone or wherever he's dropping. He understands kind of where he needs to be in his landmarks. So I'm pumped for this pick because you bring up a good point. He's something that they don't have. And I think what you wanted maybe Levi Wallace to be is something that he could be, where he could play inside and outside. And I feel like Levi probably is best outside, but at the same time, I'm not a huge Levi Wallace fan. So because I wanted them to take a corner early to potentially replace him. Like that's what I was ultimately wanting, but maybe this is the guy. And it sounds crazy. It might be a bit of a stretch, but in another year or two, this guy could be an absolute stud. He's obviously, he's got to stay healthy. He's got to continue to put in the work, and he has to trust his overall athleticism, because to be that athletic and that physical, you can't really teach that. And he's just got to find, like you said, he's out of control. I think he's got to find ways to be controlled. Like Demar Hamlin's normally controlled because he doesn't have great athleticism. He doesn't have all this, he doesn't have that physicality that Wild Goose might have on the outside, but he has that physicality in the middle of the field. And he just, everything's under control because he trusts his technique. This guy, the Wild Goose, the Goose, he's got to trust his technique. So I like the fact that they drafted the guy named Wild Goose and you get to talk about this guy for 4 years is remarkable. You're bringing up so many like good points and such great analysis, but it's so hard to take someone serious when they're saying about Wild Goose. Exactly. Like it's so hard. Like everything you're saying was so good. And then I'm just trying like not to laugh because you're like saying Wild Goose. Yeah, that's exactly what I was like. 1,000%. Yeah, he's an ad that I really liked, and part of the reason of me banging the drum for a corner in this draft was just what the corner room looks like after 2021. The only corners on this team that are under contract are Dane Jackson and Trey White, and now Wild Goose. I can't even say it without laughing. Yeah, those are the only 3 corners that are under contract. And I like that you pointed out his penalty aspect and his grabby aspect. I think that's especially why even more you let him kind of flourish more in zone to start his career. But he does have some skill set that could maybe move to man, but he's got to clean up the aggressiveness and the technique in that aspect. I think he could, especially he's really smooth with his hips. He's got great fluidity in his speed turns and his slow turns, which I like. But yeah, he's that aggressiveness, and I would agree. I think it comes from that athleticism. Sometimes it leads him astray, whether it's coming forward or being in coverage. And if you can domesticate that Goose, and so he's not as wild, man. Oh yeah, get that Goose under control, man.
Get that out in the yard, bring him inside to the house. Teach him some manners, and so domesticate him like a cat or a dog. He could be. Dude,
that guy's a walking like billboard for any like gray goose, for anything like hunting, like this. Exactly. Like this dude, the dude is a walking marketing machine, and
1,000%.
Like he got rich by getting drafted. He's gonna get richer going to Buffalo because they're like everybody's just gonna be throwing goose shit at him. Yeah. It's gonna be awesome.
He's got so much endorsement potential. It's unreal. It'd be like if some guy was, break that goose.
The goose is loose, man.
And I was gonna say, and he picked 32, OJ Simpson's number. So the juice is no longer loose. It's the goose is loose. Like it just writes itself. And it's
he had to do that on purpose.
I really hope he did. If he didn't, I'd be disappointed. But I really hope he did. And I want to see him. I want to see him nail it. I want to see people talking about him on ESPN and that's funny, the most venomous animal on the planet. I want to see people talking about him and having to say his name seriously and talking about Wild Goose, like phenomenal name.
And like one of those pregame matchups against like the Jets or something late in the year when the game probably it matters because the Bills might be, needing that win to get in the playoffs, but the Jets probably aren't going to need it because they're not going to probably be that great next year. And maybe down the road, but I don't think next year. But either way, anyways, they're going to be mentioning, this guy, he's going to get his first start like week 14 and the wild goose. And it's just going to be it's going to be awesome for pre.
It's going to be nuts. He's going to make plays for the home games for the Bills, and you're just going to hear the goose. Like you used to hear for Bruce Smith back in the day, dude. So much potential. I will agree here with Troy, who said, and I hope we bring in one more corner from the market. I completely agree. I wanted it to be Casey Hayward, and he went to the Raiders, and I'm very disappointed in that. But give me Richard Sherman or Steven Nelson. I would prefer Nelson to Sherman. I would like reinforcements via free agency. I think that corner number 2 spot can be potentially reinforced a little bit. And where's that comment from Nicholas? Yeah, I have never wanted harder for a late round pick to stick. And this is also, I clicked on this one. This is a good comment as well. Wild Goose does sound like a Canadian football team. I could see that, like the Saskatchewan Wild Goose or Wild Geese.
Winnipeg Wild Goose.
Yeah. Oh, dude, with the alliteration, the WW. Well done. Well done. See, that's why you're here. That's why you're here. For the
I used to like look at maps when I was a kid. I'd create my own football leagues. That's pretty dumb.
That's pretty sweet. No, that's pretty sweet. The closest I got was when I would create my own college in NCAA.
The
best. 2000s. And I'd give them the blue turf because no one had it other than Boise. Yeah, it was the coolest thing.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, those were the days. Those were.
I think we got one more. I think we got one more pick here, right?
We do. We got one more pick, and then we're going to talk about the rest of the AFC East briefly. So Jack Anderson, guard out of Texas Tech, tons of game experience, 4-year starter, pretty much all, if not like 99.7% of his snaps came at right guard, not just guard, specifically right guard. Better run blocker than he is a pass protector. Not a great athlete. Does lack a little bit of positional versatility. For me, I feel like he's similar to the John Feliciano mold, who the Bills obviously already have, maybe because he's younger and he comes from a heavier pass pro offense at Texas Tech that also plays up tempo. Maybe he's got a bit of a higher ceiling when it comes to his pass protection, but he wins a lot because of his physicality and his power. He does play a bit too high for me at times, but yeah, I'll take it. Reinforce the offensive line in the 7th round. Maybe you get something out of him. He is a good enough run blocker, but I would like to see the pass protection get cleaned up. I would like to see him play lower. But my only annoyance with it is I was like, oh, well, if we're going to take a guard, we could have just taken Creed Humphrey. But not that I think Creed Humphrey would have. It's the easiest thing, especially because he played more snaps at center in Oklahoma. But seeing some of the other guards that went earlier in the draft, seeing this, I was slightly annoyed because I was like, well, maybe this was just pure BPA. But I was like, man, if you thought guard was an issue, there were so many other guards earlier, but not bad.
Deontay Brown fell to like the 6th round. I mean, I'm just saying, Deontay Brown, I didn't understand that one at all.
No, there were so many guys that, and what's his face from Tennessee, Trey Smith, fell. Yeah, and the Kansas City grabbed him like they grabbed Creed Humphrey and Nick Bolton. Not that I wanted Nick Bolton, but that was a really good pick. I'm okay with this pick. Reinforce the offensive line, take it at a position that doesn't have a ton of depth. Right now, we're looking at Forrest Lamp and Ford and Feliciano, and I guess Ike Bodker, and there's high-ish, lowish, medium-ish floor guys, not a ton of ceiling. Cody Ford, you're hoping he could do something, but it's hope. You don't really know. I'm okay getting a guy who was a 4-year starter and has a ton of snaps and a ton of reps, albeit that it came at one position. Does have some things to work on, but I'm okay with this, especially taking it in the 7th round.
Yeah, and you can't get too up in arms about a 7th round guard. Like, could be a practice squad guy, could be obviously a depth guy if he makes it out of camp and everything goes well. I mean, he's got to clean up his footwork. Like it's disaster down there. Watching him get super wide and step just awkwardly. And you mentioned he plays way too high. I completely agree there. You got to play low when you're playing in the trenches, especially at guard. And, just one of those guys that I think with the experience, it could help him. But ultimately, it's so hard to say what this guy could become. Like, I'm seeing stuff he could play, he could play center and all that. That's true. But, whatever it might be, I'm just going to let this guy play right guard. And I'm going to hope that I can get him down the road if I need him, but ultimately, like, don't know what. I mean, not every 7th-round pick works out, and that's okay. Like, it's okay if this guy doesn't work out. You got, like, ultimately, I want Tommy Doyle and Spencer Brown to work out.
Yep.
But if this guy works out, great. If not, and it's not, not the end of the world. So it's a depth signing, a practice squad guy, and you just let it roll.
Yeah, I was fine with it, even though, again, he ended up going undrafted, but I was still banging the drum for Trill Williams again at this point. I was just yelling at my TV, and then he went undrafted, and I was like, oh, maybe we can get him. Saints got him. We'll see what happens. But yeah, that rounds out the Bills 2021 NFL draft picks. Now we're going to kind of stay in the same vein, but we're going to switch up a little bit, briefly touch on the rest of the AFC East. So what the Jets did, what Miami did, and what New England did. And I want to lead off with that. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. They're not even somewhat, they are related. But the first parts or first question or first part of the question. Zach Wilson, Tua, Mac Jones. If you were in a vacuum, you don't have anything else going on, there's nobody on your team, you're starting your team with one of those QBs right now today. Ooh, I know this is a good one. Which QB are you starting your team with out of Zach Wilson, Tua, or Mac Jones?
Wow. I'm going to go Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson because he's my highest ranked player out of the 3.
Okay.
And I'm going to take Zach for the simple fact that, he was my 6th ranked player this past year. I think I had Tua 8, 9, or 10 somewhere in there, and Mac Jones was like 40th. So, the safer pick would be Mac Jones. The one that I don't know, the riskier pick, I guess you could say, would be Tua, simply because of the hip. But I'm going to go Zach Wilson just because there's so much to work with. He's got a clean bill of health. The backyard style of play, this is a great question, but the backyard style of play that he has and the way the ball just flies out of his hand and at the simple flick of a wrist, some of those throws, I don't care if they were dropped. I don't care if a defender got his hand on it. If a defensive player makes a great play on a throw like that, I don't care. The guy's got to make the throw, and he does so all the time. He's just such a fun player to watch. So I think Zach Wilson, while I think he's got, and I'll probably mention more about it, he's got an uphill climb with the Jets. I think he's somebody, if I'm starting my team, I'm going to take him to try to become the guy.
I like that answer. Question 2, or I guess part 2 of that, given where each of these QBs are, so Zach Wilson with the Jets and where this team is and what they did in the draft, Tua with Miami, where they are, what they did in the draft, Mac Jones, where they are, what they did in the draft. Which one of these 3 QBs do you think is best set up for success right now, given the team they're on and the construction of that team?
Same quarterbacks, right?
Yep, same quarterback. Zach Wilson, Tua and Mac Jones.
And Mac. That's a tough one, too, because I think Mac could come in and actually start and win some football games, and I like some of the pieces that they have in New England. But I'm going to go Tua because, I mean, they were winning football games with him last year. I love their draft. Like, their first 4 picks are home runs.
Yeah.
Their first 4 picks are home runs. I think by adding a player like Will Fuller will help with the dynamic of your offense a little bit. And I mean, I would have gone after running back at some point, but I think it goes to show, they got a little bit of faith in Myles Gaskin. Maybe they add Kerryon Johnson. So with that, I'm just going to go with Tua and the Dolphins on that. So
that's fair. That was also my pick, not because I like Tua the best, but I think of the, and I guess we can just stay right there. We'll talk about the Miami Dolphins first. With what their team was already built like, combined with what they did in the draft. Even if we just start on offense, we mentioned it on Disguised Coverage when we went live. Really like the Jalen Waddle adding that route running ability and that deep threat to go along with Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki and Will Fuller. It's just a really good complement of offensive weaponry and pieces. And if you want to know, like, okay, is Tua going to be the guy? Can he be the guy? He's got a really good stable of dudes to roll with and be able to have the opportunity to throw to. He's my pick for the best QB out of the AFC East guys that are young, other than Josh Allen, who's most set up for success. But it is close between those. And then, when you start to break down their draft, Jalen Waddle, Jalen Phillips, Javon Holland, Liam Eichenberg, those, the first four right there, really strong. I like what Holland can do in the versatility. Getting Eichenberg where they got him there, he's a legit starting caliber tackle in the NFL. Yes. I liked watching his Notre Dame tape. That was part of the things that got me excited about Weaver at Pitt, watching the Pitt Notre Dame tape and seeing him get the best of Eichenberg, because I was like, I really value Eichenberg, and he got him really well. It's a shame that Weaver maybe might not be a great person in real life. But they nailed their top 4 picks. Then they come back, they get Hunter Long, the tight end from Boston College, and then they grab Larnell Coleman, tackle from UMass, and Jared Dokes, running back from Cincinnati. They address needs. They got strong players. What do you think about Miami now going into 2021, given what they did in the draft?
Well, before I get into Miami, will we add Kerryon?
Oh, boy. Talk about him, Russ.
Guys, you don't want Kerryon Johnson, okay? I didn't want Kerryon Johnson. We drafted him. The guy's been injury prone since high school. He's been injury prone in the NFL. He's great for pass protection. He's got a third down role. He could catch passes out of the backfield, but ultimately, you don't need this guy. Trust me, you don't need him. With that being said, Miami, the first 5 picks really are phenomenal. Jalen Waddle, I had them going him in the sixth pick. I think he's got, true number 1 potential, and just what he can do with the ball in his hands are it's phenomenal. Jalen Phillips, if he stays invested in the game, he can be the best edge rusher out of this class. And that's why he was the first edge rusher off the board. So, we'll see what happens. The concussions are concerning. Again, I think does he really want to play football or not? He chased music after he got away from football, but there was the whole him playing with Chip Kelly at UCLA, and Chip Kelly kind of drove him away from the program and his love for football. So then he chased music. He moves down to Miami and he falls in love with the game again, and he goes to Miami, Florida. So it must be nice to be a 5-star recruit and so talented, but that's who he is. So he can become that for Miami, become that true number 1 edge rusher that, let's be honest, they've been looking for since the days of Jason Taylor, right? Yeah. So they get that with Jalen Phillips, Javon Holland, versatility, can play nickel, can play safety. The guy can do it all. He's got ball skills. I love this kid's tape. I love what he can do. I didn't have him as my top safety, but he was close. And either way, at 36, it makes sense. And with Flores, he's going to love this kid. Eichenberg, like you said, going to play tackle. Don't know which one yet. Probably going to play right tackle. But you've got Austin Jackson and Liam Eichenberg. You got to stop the Bills' pass rusher somehow. So Eichenberg's that guy. And then Hunter Long. I thought at 81, this is a steal. I thought he could have gone around. I thought he could have went 50 to 60, somewhere in that range. He's going to play in the slot. He's going to play in line. He gives you a great effort as an inline blocker. But what stands out to me is how he doesn't create separation with his skill set of running routes or speed or anything. He wins with his hands. He's a technician. And he wins by using his hands and using his arms to create separation. He understands how to get those arm over moves and get open in his routes that way. So Hunter Long has got a ton of potential, and they were already loaded at tight end with Gesicki and everybody else, but he's gonna be a guy.
1,000%. That's a really good. It was talked about earlier in the offseason, and we even talked about in the beginning of round 1 of not wanting Kyle Pitts to fall to Miami. And not that Hunter Long is Kyle Pitts, because no one is Kyle Pitts, because he's a unicorn and is immaculate and is amazing. But Hunter Long's a pretty sweet add if he's your tight end too. And you add him to Gesicki and the receiving weaponry that we already spoke about. Again, and then offensive line reinforcements. But Tua's got some dudes he can throw to. He's got a line who should be able to protect him. I thought Miami drafted really well, unfortunately. I actually think all the other teams, the AFC East, did well, but Miami did good. I wanted to ask you a quick question. Would you rather have Jalen Phillips or Gregory Rousseau?
Oh, boy.
I'm sorry. I feel like each question I'm asked is so hard.
Man.
Because as you're thinking about it, the reason I asked it, because even myself, they're both low floor, high ceiling, but almost in different regards. Rousseau is just from a pure production refinement standpoint, Phillips is a little of that combined with injury history, potential motivation, and who he is as a person. There's pros and cons to both, ceiling and floor comps to both. They're a very interesting thing. But who would you rather have, Phillips or Rousseau?
Like Phillips is just so bendy. Phillips is so like natural off the edge, but like in run support, I literally watched that dude get his ass kicked and get demolished, like flattened to the ground type. And he gets up and he comes back and he fights through it. But God, man, that's a tough question.
You mentioned a good thing. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
You mentioned a thing that I didn't mention earlier with Rousseau, and I'm annoyed at it because it's like my biggest thing. He doesn't have bend, and his change of direction scares me. Despite having the good ankle flexibility and the flexion, he doesn't have great change of direction, and he doesn't have good bend. Phillips does, and I can't believe I forgot that. That's a big thing for me. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Jalen Phillips just off of some of that stuff. Just the bend, the overall flexibility, like, again, him in the run game kind of scares me a little bit, his commitment, his concussions, but Greg Rousseau could be the best edge rusher out of the class, but so could Jalen Phillips, and honestly, so could Kwity Paye. So all three of those guys could be great. Jason Owe could be great. It's truly, there was no true like number one edge. It was pick your flavor, what you need, what are you going with, and I'm just going to go off of the upsides, and I think Phillips can become that dude.
That's fine. Get off the stream. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's fair. Like
great guys. Yeah. Talk to you later.
So with that, goodbye forever. No, I think that's a very fair statement and reasonable thing. And even so, a lot of people in the chat were immediately throwing up and saying like Phillips, which is nice to see that objectivity coming from Bills Mafia. And yeah, he's got so many things you like, a lot of variables, much like Rousseau. It's interesting that both guys are like from Miami and have all these great traits, but also have all these questions. It's like such a weird mixing, coincidental comparison. Very interesting for Miami. Now we'll go to the New York Jets. Zach Wilson, the second quarterback taken in this NFL draft behind Trevor Lawrence, the number 2 pick overall. I really liked especially like they had a good draft as well, but especially their first 3 picks, having Zach Wilson, Elijah Vera Tucker was like my 3rd favorite prospect in this draft. And then they come back in the 2nd and they get Elijah Moore. And then after Elijah Moore, they get Michael Carter from North Carolina, who I like Javonte Williams, but I may have even liked Carter more than Javonte Williams. And they really hit a bunch of things. They got Bills fan favorite Hamza Nasruddin late in the draft. I wasn't as high on him as some others were, but the Jets had a very good draft as well, which they should because they had a gajillion picks. What are your thoughts on how the Jets did and where they stand now?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I liked what they were able to do as far as moving around a little bit. They were still able to get some of their guys. So obviously Zach Wilson, if he's got an uphill climb here, right? He's got to put it all together. It's going to be a tough climb. Like there's weapons to work with, but is Corey Davis a true number 1? I don't know. I didn't love Denzel Mims when he was coming out. We'll see what happens. But ultimately, like there's stuff there to work with. And then outside of that, Mekhi Becton, another year, should take another step forward. Elijah Vera Tucker, maybe one of the safest picks in the first round. Yep. You get him at 14. You bring in Elijah Moore, who I thought was the best slot receiver, but can it translate in year 1? I don't know. We'll see. But the guy's a reception machine. And he's a double move machine. So there's a lot there. Those first 3 picks should be boom starters, making it happen. And even Michael Carter, round 4, to get probably the number 4 back on the consensus of boards, to get him at 107 is insane to me. I didn't love him compared to Javonte Williams, but I still liked him. I loved what he could do in the open field, how he made defenders miss. That jump cutting ability is just so natural. He's going to be a natural fit for their zone scheme. And so to get really the offense revamped in that regard with the first 4 picks, and then bring in Jamie Sherwood, who just throws his body around. He's going to play. He's going to play down in the box. He's going to play in a variety of spots. And, I don't want to say he's like Fred Warner by any means, because that's not what I mean by any means. But what I'm getting at is Robert Saleh finds these defenders that are just so talented to come up and attack and do different things. Sherwood could be that guy. Michael Carter on the outside playing corner, whether he's playing in the slot, whether he's playing safety. I think he can do those things. The same with Jason Pinnock and then, Nasruddin, same thing. I think all four of those guys have the potential to develop into something on this defense because of Robert Saleh. Now, if it was Adam Gase taking them and that staff, I'd be like, okay, those guys are doomed. But these guys, with some of the talent that they already have on the defense, they added Carl Lawson. So there's a lot for them to get better. And obviously they already have Quinnen Williams. So I don't know if these guys are going to necessarily be all sure things in year one, but I think in time they can be. So I do like their draft quite a bit. Again, though, it's all going to be on the shoulders of that second pick. And what can Zach Wilson do? If he comes out and throws 5 touchdowns to 15 interceptions, and obviously it's a different conversation. But I think there's a lot to work with a team that drafted that well, and they had a good draft.
For sure. And right as you were talking about AVT, Ron put a great comment in there with their left side of the line should be rock solid. Now you got Becton at left tackle. Vera Tucker should also slide into left guard is what they're talking about. And I was on the same board with Vera Tucker. I thought he was one of the safest picks in the entire draft. I think he still has a high ceiling, but he had a ridiculously high floor. I would have loved for him to fall to the Bills. I thought that was a great pick. So they get him there. And I liked the separation of everything. Like they go offense with their first 4 picks, and then the back half is just pure defense, all of it. And yeah, I love Robert Saleh. We talked about it during the draft. He's a Detroit guy. I thought he was going to go home to Detroit and make the Lions sweet, and instead he went to the Jets. And I was upset because I think he's a good coach and good call on Sherwood. His tape at Auburn is so fun, and he's a fast, lankier, like rangy linebacker. And again, it's tough to say Fred Warner, but dude, it's easy to see why you would potentially say that or think about it with Saleh and what he can do and what he got Warner to be and what Sherwood could potentially be. And then, Carter, I think it's funny they drafted 2 Michael Carters, but, Michael Carter from Duke and then Pinnock and Nasruddin and then Eccles from Kentucky, just dudes who can play. You put him with a guy who's great at coaching people and knowing what's going on, and they potentially could have something. I like how I don't like to pat myself on the back, but I love how we just power through your potentially technical difficulties as your camera went out or you turned it off. And whatever.
Yeah, no, I had to turn my camera off. There's a spider the size of
Kill it.
I can't. It's
why?
Literally, it's like this big.
What? So what are you going to do? You can't let it live.
Dude, I've got my feet. I got my feet up. I am freaking out right now.
I'm freaking out. Kill it.
Dude, this thing is huge. I'm going to turn this off again.
Kill it. That spider sounds like he's the bomb on Don's. You have to kill that spider. Oh my God. Please kill that spider. Oh, someone said feed it. Oh no, that is. Yeah, John said you're 100 times bigger than the spider. You can do it. Oh, people are saying you could keep it as a pet. Nicholas said you could call in an airstrike. You got to kill that spider, bro. I feel you. Like, spiders are scary, and I'm not a fan as well. And I don't want to sit here and say oh yeah, man up and do this. But especially if it's that big, you don't want to. I saw Arachnophobia when I was little, and that movie scarred me for life, folks. I'm not a fan of spiders. I don't think a lot of people are, but you got to take care of it. Russ, you got to take care of that spider. But we are going to continue to move on as we start to wind down here and talk about what the New England Patriots did. That's funny. The spider just ate him. Yeah, the spider might have gotten the best of him. If he doesn't come back, we know the spider won. And I don't know what Russ's future or fate holds. Oh, I'm loving all the spider chat. No, I don't think anybody's a fan of spiders. Who's a fan of spiders? If someone really has a tarantula, I'm not. That's scary. I don't even want to talk about it. I'm going to stop talking about it. Russ, I wish you the best. I know you can still hear me. Keep rocking out. We look forward to you coming back on shortly. Ron, I don't think he can squish it if it's that big. What happened, Russ? Did you do it?
Got out the vacuum. He's dead.
Are you sure he's dead, or is he just in the vacuum?
Either way, we can move forward. That is dude.
The chat was blowing up, dude, with suggestions and thoughts. Everybody had.
I could hear you guys. I could hear you.
I didn't see this one. Nicholas said to bring the spider in as a camp body.
Oh my God. Dude, that thing literally walked right by me, and I look over and I go, what? And then I had to take like 7 takes. It's in a vacuum cleaner. I am not showing anybody that. That is a
Okay.
disaster. I had to like remove my green screen. This is a mess now. Where are we going now?
I
We're
like
done
it.
with the Jets.
We finished talking about the Jets. We finished talking about the Jets. I powered through like the professional that I am. And I
Yeah.
was going to start talking about the Pats and leading into it, but then everybody in the comments, we started talking about spiders and how you need to deal with it and address it. And so that conversation happened. So now we're going to start some Pats talk. The Pats had a pretty good draft as well. They get their quarterback, Mac Jones.
Yep.
Honestly, the thought was really going to be whichever QB falls to them is the one they're going to get. Then they come back with Christian Barmore, who I know started to have some red flags as the draft process went through, but I like Barmore. They get Ronnie Perkins, edge out of Oklahoma. And then they get Ramondre Stevenson, running back from Oklahoma. They get Cam McGrone, linebacker from Michigan. Joshua Bledsoe, safety from Missouri, who a lot of people liked, potentially being even higher in the draft than where the Pats got him late. Then they get William Sherman, offensive lineman from Colorado, and Trey Nixon, wide receiver from UCF, who a lot of people liked. I thought they had a good draft. Here's my only question for them with New England. Mac Jones, Cam Newton, very different skill sets, very different type of quarterback. Whoever is the starter for this year, I'm interested to see, like, if Cam Newton is the starter for New England this year in 2021, right? What that offense looks like and is what is designed for Cam is going to be vastly different than what is going to be designed for Mac Jones. So if Mac Jones takes over middle of the year, I wonder what that looks like, because I don't think they can succeed in the same system given their strengths and weaknesses. I also am not the biggest fan of Mac Jones, but I think he does have a high floor and could succeed in New England. I love the comment, can the Spider play cornerback too? That would be awesome
I just saw that too.
If the Spider could play cornerback too. Let it out of the vacuum in time it's 40 and see how it mans up against other Spiders and how it covers in zone, and then we can analyze it for CB2. That's a good comment. Yeah, I like what the Pats did, especially in the front half. I like the Bledsoe pick late. I like the Trey Nixon pick late, given the value in the spot. It's all going to come down to Mac Jones, but as we have done already with the Jets and the Dolphins, well, the Dolphins and then the Jets respectively, what are your thoughts on the Pats, their draft, where they stand now, and how they look in the AFC East?
Yeah, well, hopefully in the process I don't get eaten by a spider. Another one.
I saw that Rod had 2 great comments. You're on the Spider Show with Ann Russ. Go ahead, caller. That's very good. And then Ron also mentioned how you keep looking around like there's
dude.
more
I'm
coming.
not even kidding you, dude. I'm like looking left to right. I'm like, dude. But yeah, no. So the question was, who's going to start? Mac Jones, Cam Newton, right? Like,
Yeah, and like, what do we think of the future of that, like the team as a whole and that offense, given how different they are and where we go from here?
yeah, I mean, obviously they brought in Cam. They tried something different. I think Belichick really looked at Jared Stidham as possibly the guy, and then he saw him and he was like, no,
I'm out.
there's no way, right? And so he brings in Cam on that 1-year deal, because remember, Cam came in real late. Then he was playing well, and then he got COVID, and it kind of messed everything up. So I think Cam is different from anything that they've ever had, but then they bring him in, it all kind of goes, and then they bring him back on another 1-year deal. I don't know exactly what the market was like for Cam. I don't think it's great by any means. But Mac is their guy. That's the guy of the future for them. And they're going to design an offense that's built for him to succeed. And I think the fact that they were able to sit there and get him to fall to their lap.
Yeah.
That's huge. They've added weapons. We'll see what those weapons ultimately turn into for them, and how successful it all is. But to go out and get Hunter Henry, to get Jonnu Smith, I think is huge. And especially for a quarterback who, might struggle, I think, at times pushing the ball vertically down the field, like in the NFL, to have kind of that person in the middle of the field and have that trust is going to be huge. So Mac, I think, can definitely take a step forward, and he fell into maybe the best spot for him to be successful. I could be wrong. I don't know if there's going to be that much pressure on him compared to some other quarterbacks in this draft. Like Zach Wilson's going to have to play right away. Trevor Lawrence is going to have to play right away. Trey Lance, right? Like Trey Lance is going to have to, it feels like I have to get that team to the Super Bowl and win. Mac Jones is going to have to come in and really, he can play his game and he can play comfortably. So I'm okay with that pick at 15. And I'm excited to see what he does. But then Christian Barmore at 38, like, that's such a Patriot pick, right?
It
Like
really is.
it sucks to see him go there, but it makes sense. And like where the value was, like he was 40th or 42nd on my board. So like literally they got guys that were like neck and neck on my board at the first and second round. I like Ronnie Perkins a lot, wrote about him over at Cover One. And he's one of those guys that I think has got kind of some untapped potential, and he fell into a good spot. And you bring in kind of more of like that blend of speed to power where you've got maybe Chase Winovich, who's not that type of player. He's more probably speed and that type of game and get off, where Perkins, he's got a good get off, but he's also got kind of that blend. So you bring him in, and he only lasted this far because he had kind of an off the field issue. He had a marijuana charge against him. Well, not a marijuana charge, but he got caught with marijuana, was suspended from the Oklahoma team for a little while. So there's a whole thing there, but if he can put it together, great. I like the Stevenson pick actually, because I think Sony Michel is probably done. Like
they might didn't pick up his out.
Yeah, they didn't pick up his option. He might even be cut by the time we get to preseason. So Stevenson I like, and McGrone, I will say this, to get him at 177, he didn't play a ton this past year. He kind of was dinged up, and but he flashed every time you watch that football team on defense. He flashed. And I think he fell again to a good spot that if he can develop with that sideline range that he has, he's got that range and that sideline ability. He's not necessarily going to stack and shade. He's not going to get rid of blocks. He's not going to do that. But I think that's a great developmental piece. The rest, Bledsoe, fun safety. Sherman, don't know anything about. Nixon, didn't watch him, so I can't really say. But those are 6th, 7th round guys. So Bledsoe I could see turning into something, because it always feels like they have a safety or a secondary, right? a defensive back that just develops. So I could see it being Bledsoe. But ultimately, again, I can't. This was a very Patriot-like draft. They hit on some needs. I think they got good value. So where we looked maybe last year and we're like, man, this team is toast. They don't have Tom Brady. You bring in Mac Jones. I'm not saying this guy's like the second coming or anything, but I mean, there's some promise here. There's some potential. So, and that's the thing. What was Mac Jones going to be in the NFL without all those weapons? He's not getting necessarily the same type of weapons, but he's going to get some help. So that's the key for Mac Jones. And if he can get that help and he plays at a high enough level, they can win some football games.
Very true. I think Damian Harris is a forgotten running back in the NFL. I still like him. And then you throw Mac into an offense with experienced coaching and experienced coaching staff, a really good tight end system there with Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. And then Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne and crew aren't the best receivers, but they're enough to get it done if they're complementary pieces to a running game or to Jonnu and Hunter Henry. And he set Mac up decently for success. I think that's right on the head. For us, rank the AFC East 2021 draft classes from 1st all the way through 4th. Who's the best? Who's second? Who's third? Who's 4th? I know. I'm putting you on the spot for a lot of these.
I'm going to go Miami, the Jets, the Patriots, the Bills.
Oh, Bills are last.
You can't double down twice and expect to get a good grade. Come on.
That's fair. That's very fair. You know, it's funny. It's a thought. I've gone back and forth on this a lot, even just, again, and as we start to wind down here, I've gone back and forth even now, like we're a week from when the draft happened, and I've gone back and forth, not necessarily in terms of like, I like it, I hate it, I like it, I hate it, but I recognize the need and I recognize the potentials and the ceilings and the positional premiums that were available and what was done. And I think Ron said it earlier, like they were positions of need and they were good picks, but they were also like kind of head scratching and interesting at the same time. I'm still very like, I don't dislike Rousseau. I don't dislike Basham. I don't dislike any of the prospects. We didn't take anybody who I'm like, they suck and I'm upset that we took that person. But there were things that I'm still like, like several times where I was like, well, we could have had this or we could have had Y and Z. I still have faith in Bean. But as someone mentioned earlier, like just, because someone has a good track record doesn't mean they're infallible or perfect or above being questioned, which I got into a large debate with people on Twitter last Sunday about. But yeah, I think that's a fair thing, especially with Ron just mentioned it in the chat. Like the better or higher picks or more picks that the other teams had. I think that's fair. If you've got higher picks, it's going to look better. It's going to sound better. And I think it's fair to put the Bills fourth, especially with how some of these other teams hit. Here's a comment here from Steve. When you don't have as many holes, you are afforded the luxury of doubling down on a premium position and using other picks for high potential developmental pieces. The draft made sense. Fair enough, Steve. My counter to that would be, I think you still could have used picks on high potential developmental pieces that didn't have as many variables, or also maybe potentially hit areas of need while still capitalizing on that potential. Again, for me, like even just where I like Rousseau, I like Owe much more. He's still, to me, Jason Owe is still a high potential developmental piece, but I think he also has a higher floor than Rousseau. And I think that's kind of the thought process when it comes to the doubling down and with the people that they took. Russ, what are your thoughts on that comment there?
Yeah, well, you don't have as many holes. You are, like, you're right. You have the luxury. I've said that multiple times.
For sure.
But you also don't have the luxury to take multiple players at the same position and expect that all four of those players, or two out of the four, are going to develop into the high potential that we all might view them as, when you could have also gotten a high developmental piece at cornerback where you need help there. You could look at maybe safety, because let's be honest, Hyde and Poyer aren't going to play forever. You have, I mentioned Milano earlier. Matt Milano has been injured. You need to find somebody to possibly fill in his shoes. And I gave you an example of who that person could have been. Wallow, I know we got Dawson Knox on the roster, but how about Hunter Long? How about Tommy Tremble? There's tight ends, there's some running backs. So there's definitely other needs other than two edge rushers and two offensive tackles who are both 6'8". So it's hard to say that, yeah, you have the luxury to do that. You do have the luxury to kind of do what you want, but you don't have the luxury, I don't care who you are, to double down on a position with some of the variables that come into the play on those players and the variances of their skill set. So that's why they're low on the board for me, because again, I like Rousseau. I like Spencer Brown. I even like Carlos Basham, but at the end of the day, like, you can't double down on a position.
I think you said that very eloquently, and that was well said. And I think for me, it was, it's been mentioned for a couple people in the chat already. I would have liked more attention to corner number 2 and guard. Someone mentioned like Wyatt Davis. Oh, yeah, Nicholas mentioned, which is why I was disheveled when we didn't snag Wyatt Davis or Creed Humphrey in round 2. Yeah, I can see that. I would have, and I pulled up the other comment from Bills Are Electric. The guard and interior line play was overlooked early in the draft. I would feel a lot better if we signed a corner in free agency, but that was another thing for me too, like knowing where we could have potentially upgraded corner, especially outside corner, and potentially upgraded on the interior O-line. I'm okay if Feliciano and Ford are the starting interior guys, or Forrest Lamp somehow knocks it out of the park, but I think there's a lot of, like you said, variability is the perfect way to describe it. There's a lot of variables with that, let alone with the draft picks. And I think that's where it comes down to. I think, but the philosophy of it, of drafting for long-term more than short, I think is fine. Looking to grab guys with really high potential and really high ceilings, I think that's a very good thing as well. Like, I'm all on board for that, but I think there could have been potential other ways to maximize potential ceilings, floors, and position of need at the same time. And yeah, that's the only thing that really, like, I'm still thinking about when looking back on the draft. But especially if you're considering it in the AFC East, I don't think anyone in the AFC East did anything that vaults them over the Buffalo Bills. I still think the Bills are the best team in that division. Yep. But this is the draft that we're gonna look back on this and like, when the 2023 draft rolls around, of being like, oh man, well, we're set up for huge success because of how 2021 went, or we're going to sit here being like, we missed the boat on that one, especially too, because the Bills are on the come up. So these high ceiling guys and these developmental guys, you need them to hit because you need to keep that train rolling. That's how you build that sustainable success year after year, by hitting on these picks or bringing in that talent and developing it. And if you take too many high ceiling guys and too many high ceiling, low floor guys, and if majority of them end up being on the low floor, all of a sudden you find yourself potentially with an empty cupboard in certain areas. That's the only thing. But I think that's overall fair. Oof. I figured you were going to have the Bills fourth. I figured that, and I'm not mad at it. I don't think anybody should be mad at it. I think it's just acceptance.
Yeah, you bring in developmental guys. You don't get 10 years to develop players. Like you got a 2, 3, maybe a 4-year window to get guys going. And I have a hard time buying that. I'm sorry, I don't live in fantasy land. I can't sit there and say this guy's going to be starting right tackle. I'm going to move so-and-so here, and this other guy's going to play left guard, and this guy's going to play edge rusher for 17. Like, it's just not going to – just doesn't happen. Like, it just doesn't.
That's very fair, and I agree. I'm going to throw up the banner. It says Toodles, you guys, and what that means is we're starting to wind down. We're going to start saying our goodbyes. I want to thank everyone for riding with us on this episode of Disguise Coverage. This whole offseason, we've been getting into really in-depth conversations, and the chats have been great. And as such, a lot of these episodes, especially the last month, 2 months, really ever since the salary cap special episode that Greg and I did back in February, we've been rolling a solid 2 hours, and the views have been great. The engagement has been great. You guys have been riding with us tremendously on this live show. So thank you very much to everybody who rode with us live on this. Thank you to anyone who is watching this after. Be nice to the spider. That's super funny. Thank you to everyone who watches this after, listens to this after, whatever, so on and so forth. However you are supporting Disguise Coverage and Cover One, I am greatly, greatly appreciative and greatly thankful for any and all that. You guys are the best. Really can't do it without you. Appreciate you guys. And I could not have done this show tonight without you, Russ. You were immediately in my head. I should have even reached out to you earlier than I did, because this was my plan for this all along, especially how well the live show went last week. You were a huge pleasure to have on last week, a huge pleasure to have on tonight. We had some extra drama with the whole spider situation, which was a fun thing. But no, you're a great guest in so many ways, and the conversation was great, and you're so knowledgeable, and it was awesome chopping it up with you. And I know everybody in the chat loved what you were bringing, and yeah, I couldn't have done this without you. Appreciate you coming back and be willing to come back. And why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and what you do and all that stuff?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's always fun. I mean, really the last 2-3 times I've only been on this show is the only time we've really done some collabing and working together. So it's been a lot of fun. But yeah, find me on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft. It's pretty straightforward from there. You find me there. And I mean, I talk nonsense. I do a lot of video stuff. And of course, the content's over at cover1.net. You can find my author page there and all that. You can also find the Cover One Draft podcast, which you can rate, review, and subscribe to on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the whole nine, wherever you get your podcasts. So, this is always fun. It's always fun talking draft. It's always fun just talking football. So whenever you want to do it, let me know. And it's always a fun time. So appreciate everybody.
I appreciate you. Everybody's 1,000% going to remember you and the spider and I feel like it's going to overshadow how awesome you are with the draft and football knowledge. But I feel like everybody's going to be like, oh yeah, the spider guy.
Yeah, Spider-Man. I'm Spider-Man now. It's awesome.
You're also getting some support for the Lions. Nicholas is happy the Lions had a baller draft this year, finally, and Ron said the same thing. The Lions on the come up. The Lions are potentially
slow down. They are not on the come up. Relax. Let's play a game first. Let's bite some kneecaps and see how it tastes.
Hey man, if Aaron Rodgers leaves the Packers, that division is up for grabs.
I mean, Justin Fields going to take it over. So
yeah, that's true. The Bears had a good draft as well. Even if they would have just ended up with Fields and Tevin Jenkins, I would have been so happy for the Bears. They did well as well. Good for them.
That's all they needed.
Hell yeah. It's been real, everyone. Thank you so much for riding with us. I, of course, am Anthony, your regular host here on Disguise Coverage. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 underscores ANT. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage. I know I say it every week, but it's tremendously important. That stuff helps Cover One and Disguise Coverage trend and track and all that stuff and props us up in rankings for more eyes, more visibility. Thank you all for all the support, feedback, both positive and negative and constructive and all that stuff. As always, I wish you and your family and friends and loved ones the best. I hope you all stay happy and healthy. I will see you next week. Thank you very much to Russ. And as always, go Bills.